Hello everyone, and welcome to the Ben 10 What Ifs. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Ben 10 created his own alien universe. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Architect of Worlds. Ben 10 Feet S Nexus. Chapter 1. Genesis. Sile. NCE filled the reinforced laboratory buried 2 miles beneath Bellwood's surface, broken only by the soft hum of equipment and the occasional metallic click as Dr. Celine Thorne adjusted the alignment of the quantum stabilizers. She worked with practiced precision, her movements economical and focused. The subdued lighting caught in her dark hair, pulled back in a practical knot at the nape of her neck. A few escaped strands framing a face more accustomed to concentration than smiles. The Celestial Sapien DNA integration is holding at 93% compatibility, she announced without looking up from her instruments. Better than expected, though I'd prefer something closer to 98. Ben Tennyson stood before the central platform, eyes fixed on holographic projections discs, playing cascading sequences of alien genetic code. At 28, he'd grown into his lanky teenage frame, now standing 6'2" with the solid build of someone who'd spent half his life in combat. The iconic Omnitrix still adorned his wrist, though the device had evolved alongside its bearer, now appearing as an elegant band of shifting metals that seemed to flow like liquid around his forearm. 93 is within acceptable parameters, Ben replied, swiping through projections with practiced ease. His voice carried the quiet authority of someone accustomed to making universe-altering decisions. Azimuth's original calculations suggested anything above 90 would provide sufficient stability for initial genesis. Celine arched an eyebrow. Sufficient stability is a remarkable. Why low bar when we're talking about ripping a hole in the fabric of reality? A hint of a smile played across Ben's features as he tapped a sequence, expanding a particular strand of DNA. Come on, Doc, where's your sense of scientific adventure? I must have left it in my other lab coat. The one not rated for quantum catastrophes. Ben laughed, the sound genuine despite the tension of the moment. He'd always appreciated Celine's unflinching honesty. In a world where most people either feared or worshipped the legendary Ben 10, her refusal to be impressed by anything short of actual achievement had been refreshing from the day they'd met 5 years ago. The memory flashed unbidden. Incarsine warships decimating a plumber research station, the desperate evacuation, finding Celine calmly collecting samples while the station collapsed around her. These specimens represent 4 extinct species, she'd explained without looking up. I'm not leaving without them. He'd transformed into XLR-8, evacuated 87 scientists in under 6 minutes, then returned to find her sealing the last containment unit. Now I'm ready, she'd said simply. Their professional relationship had begun that day, evolving over time as they worked together on increasingly complex projects. None as ambitious as this one, however. Final power calibration complete, Celine announced, interrupting his reminiscence. Chronometric stabilizers online, dimensional buffers at maximum capacity. She hesitated, fingers hovering over the final sequence. Ben, I need to ask one more time. Are we certain this is the right course of action? Ben stepped away from the holographic display, moving to the center of the laboratory where a massive circular platform dominated the space. Embedded in the floor around it, 18 galvanic conductors pulsed with blue-white energy, forming an intricate pattern of interlocking geometries. You've reviewed the data yourself, he said quietly. 53 species extinct in the last year alone. 17 habitable planets destroyed. The universe is experiencing a rate of biodiversity loss unprecedented in cosmic history. And your solution is to create an entirely new universe. One where you set the rules. The challenge in her voice was clear, but so was the curiosity, the scientific mind that couldn't help but be fascinated by the possibilities. A pocket dimension, Ben corrected. Though the distinction was largely semantic. A sanctuary where endangered species can survive regardless of what happens in our reality. He met her gaze directly. If there's another option, Celine. I'm listening. She maintained eye contact for a long moment before shaking her head. There isn't. Not with our current technology and the acceleration of the crisis. A resigned sigh escaped her as she entered the final sequence. For the record, I'm still not comfortable playing gods. We're not playing gods, Ben said, stepping onto the platform as it began to glow with intricate patterns of green energy. "We're doing what we've always done, trying to save lives with the tools available to us." He extended his arm, the Omnitrix responding to his ts more than his movements after years of synchronization. The device reconfigured itself, components shifting and expanding to cover his entire forearm in a lattice of alien technology beyond human understanding. "Final safety protocols engaged," Selene confirmed, moving to a position directly across from him as her own platform activated. "Chronometric shielding active. If anything goes wrong." "It won't," Ben interrupted, the confidence in his voice born from years of impossible successes rather than bravado. "If anything goes wrong," she continued pointedly, "we have exactly 8.3 seconds before temporal feedback loops begin. After that, even the Omnitrix won't save us." Ben nodded, acknowledging the danger without being deterred by it. Initiating primary sequence. The Omnitrix pulsed, cycling through configurations faster than human eyes could follow before settling on a combination never before activated. Green energy cascaded up Ben's arm, enveloping him in a cocoon of light. When it receded, he stood transformed, not into any single alien form, but something new. His body retained humanoid proportions but now gleamed with cosmic energy. Stars seemed to move beneath his skin, galaxies swirling in the depths of his eyes. Celestial Sapian influence was evident in the horns that curved from his forehead and the black energy that comprised parts of his form, but elements of other species were present as well. Chronosapian components integrated into his chest, galvanic mental enhancements visible as circuitry patterns across his temples. "Amalgam transformation stable," he announced, his voice resonating with harmonic undertones. Initiating dimensional fold, he raised both hands, cosmic energy gathering between them to form a pulsing sphere of possibilities. Reality itself seemed to bend around it, light refracting at impossible angles as fundamental forces responded to his will. The sphere expanded, growing from fist-size to nearly 6 feet in diameter. Its surface rippling with mathematical equations given physical form. "Quantum fluctuations at predicted levels," Selene reported, monitoring multiple streams of data simultaneously. "Temporal stability holding at 87%. The sphere continued expanding until it resembled a portal, edges defined yet somehow indistinct, as though the human mind couldn't quite process what it was seeing. Through its center, nothing was visible, not darkness, but the absence of anything recognizable as reality. "Genesis portal established," Ben stated, preparing initial topology imprint. Warn. Ing klaxon suddenly blared as red indicators flashed across Selene's monitoring station. "Unexpected particle acceleration. The dimensional boundaries are becoming permeable." Before she could complete the warning, tendrils of energy lashed out from the portal, whipping through the laboratory with sentient purpose. Equipment shattered as the tendrils sought anchor points in conventional reality. The laboratory's reinforced structure groaning under forces it was never designed to contain. "The portal's destabilizing," Selene shouted over the increasing chaos. "Something's interfering with the formation parameters." Ben didn't waste breath responding. His transformed state allowed him to perceive the problem directly. The nascent pocket dimension was developing its own gravitational signature prematurely, pulling matter and energy from their reality before proper boundaries had been established. With practiced precision, he adjusted the Omnitrix component integrated into his current form, shifting the balance of alien DNA to emphasize Chronosapian temporal manipulation. Time slowed around him, giving him precious seconds to analyze the cascading failures. The solution came to him with crystalline clarity. He couldn't close the portal now that it had formed. The energy backlash would devastate a 50-mile radius. But he could redirect it, channel the dimensional tear away from Earth to a location where it could stabilize safely. "Selene." His voice cut through the temporal distortion. "I need to move the portal terminus. It's going to create a vacuum effect when I do. Be ready." She didn't waste time asking questions, immediately activating emergency protocols and securing herself to the monitoring station with magnetized boots. "Ready." Ben channeled cosmic energy T. Hero, the mathematical construct he'd spent years developing with Azimuth's guidance. The portal shuddered, its edges becoming even more indistinct as it began to detach from its anchor points in the laboratory. The reaction was immediate and violent. Air rushed toward the portal as differential pressure sought equilibrium, creating hurricane force winds within the confined space. Equipment not bolted down became deadly projectiles, forcing Ben to split his concentration between controlling the portal and creating a defensive barrier around Celine's position. With a sound like reality itself. Tearing, a noise that existed more as a concept than an actual auditory experience, the portal wrenched free of its initial coordinates. For one terrifying moment, it existed in a state of quantum uncertainty, potentially able to re-establish anywhere in the universe. Ben poured every ounce of his concentration into guiding it, using celestial Sapian reality manipulation to define new coordinates in deep space. Far from any inhabited systems. The portal resisted, its semi-sentient nature fighting his control as it sought the path of least resistance. "It's not stabilizing," Celine shouted over the howling chaos. "The coordinate lock isn't holding." Ben made an instant decision. "Then we follow it through. Maintain connection with the Omnitrix signal." Before she could protest, he grabbed her arm and propelled them both toward the portal just as it collapsed into a singularity and vanished from conventional space. The laboratory imploded behind them, air and debris rushing to fill the vacuum where the portal had been. Transition through the dimensional boundary felt like being simultaneously compressed to subatomic size and expanded to galactic proportions. Human senses weren't equipped to process the experience, and only Ben's transformed state prevented immediate unconsciousness. They emerged into nothing. Not empty space, not darkness, but literal nothingness. A void without properties, without physics, without the most fundamental aspects of reality that defined existence. Here, concepts like location and duration had no meaning. They weren't anywhere because where didn't exist yet. Celine's scream was silent in the absence of air or any medium for sound transmission. Her body began to break down at the molecular level, human biology incapable of surviving in a realm without physical laws to govern its existence. Ben reacted instinctively, extending his transformation's energy field around her, creating a bubble of defined reality within the void. Inside this microsphere, conventional physics applied. Air formed from energy converted to matter, temperature regulated to human tolerance, gravity established at Earth normal. Celine collapsed to her knees, gasping as her lungs found air again. What? Where? Words failed as she tried to comprehend their situation. "We're inside the nascent pocket dimension," Ben explained, maintaining the ray liddy bubble through continuous concentration. "Before anything else exists, before rules exist, around them, the nothingness extended infinitely in all directions, or perhaps there was no distance at all. Without established physical laws, perception itself became unreliable." "It's beautiful," Celine whispered, scientific curiosity overcoming initial terror as she stared into the void. "Pure potential, unlimited possibility, and completely unstable," Ben added grimly. "I can maintain this bubble temporarily, but we need to establish baseline physical constants or the dimensional fold will collapse, trapping us here permanently." Quote. Celine straightened, professionalism reasserting itself as she activated the portable scanner built into her lab coat's sleeve. The void is accepting energy inputs. It's responding to the bubble's parameters, beginning to adopt them as precedent. Ben nodded. "That's our way forward. We need to define fundamental forces, establish the rules this reality will follow." "You mean literally create physics?" Despite everything they'd planned, the actual implementation seemed to give Celine pause. "Just decide how an entire universe will function. We start with the basics. Conservation of energy, thermodynamic principles, gravitational constants." Ben's transformed state allowed him to visualize these abstract concepts as manipulable constructs. The building blocks of reality. He extended his awareness beyond their bubble, projecting mathematical definitions into the void. Where these definitions touched nothingness, something began to form, not matter, not yet, but the potential for matter. The framework upon which existence could be constructed. Celine watched in fascination as ripples of possibility spread outward from their position. "It's working. The void is accepting the parameters. We're seeing the first quantum fluctuations consistent with established physics. For what might have been minutes or eons, time itself was STI. Forming as a concept, they worked together." Ben projected the fundamental constants while Celine monitored their integration and stability, suggesting adjustments where necessary. Gradually, the nothingness around them gained properties. Distance became measurable. Duration became sequential. Potential energy began accumulating in patterns that would eventually give rise to matter. "We should name it," Celine said suddenly, breaking a long concentration. "This place. It needs a designation more specific than pocket dimension." Ben considered, looking out at the gradually forming reality around them. "Nexus. Where possibilities converge." "Nexus," she repeated, testing the word. "Appropriate. Both scientifically accurate and suitably dramatic for your taste." He smiled at the gentle jab. "You know me too well, Doc." Their moment of accomplishment was short-lived. Without warning, the emerging physical constants began to warp, mathematical precision giving way to chaotic fluctua. Tions that threatened their fragile bubble of stability. "Something's wrong." Celine's scanner displayed rapidly shifting values as fundamental forces oscillated wildly. "The constants aren't holding. It's like the dimension is rejecting our parameters." Ben expanded his awareness, searching for the source of the disruption. What he found sent a chill through him despite his transformed state. "It's not rejecting our parameters. It's developing its own. The void has some form of rudimentary consciousness. It's trying to self-define." "That's impossible. We're talking about empty dimensional space. It can't have awareness." "Conventional space, no. But this is different." Ben's cosmic perception allowed him to sense patterns invisible to normal detection. "Remember how the portals seemed to fight my control? There's something here, something pre-existing. Not sentience as we understand it, but potential. Raw possibility thinking about itself." Around them, reality continued unraveling as conflicting rules of physics created dangerous paradoxes. Matter formed only to dissolve as the constants governing its existence fluctuated. Energy pathways formed and collapsed in nanoseconds. The bubble protecting them began to destabilize as even Ben's transformed powers struggled against the fundamental chaos. "We need to synchronize," he decided, reaching for Celine's hand. "I can project the constants. But I need you to help me make them stick. Your understanding of xenobiology might be the key. If this dimension has a proto-consciousness, we need to communicate with it, not just impose our will." Celine hesitated for a fraction of a second before gripping his hand firmly. "What do you need me to do?" "Think of it as first contact with an utterly alien intelligence. One that doesn't perceive reality the way we do. I'll create a conceptual interface through the Omnitrix. You need to help me frame our parameters in a way it can understand and accept." The Omnitrix components integrated into his transformed state reconfigured, extending connections to Celine's neural patterns. Her eyes widened as her consciousness expanded, suddenly able to perceive the dimensional fabric directly. "Oh," she breathed, wonder and scientific fascination overwhelming momentary fear. "I can feel it. It's curious, like a child touching everything without understanding consequences." Together they began the delicate work of negotiation with an entity that existed as pure conceptual potential. Ben provided the mathematical precision, defining physical laws with perfect clarity, while Celine translated these abstractions into patterns that resonated with the proto-consciousness of Nexus itself. Progress came in fits and starts. Certain constants were readily accepted: conservation of energy, basic atomic structures, fundamental forces like gravity and electromagnetism. Others met resistance, particularly those governing temporal linearity and causality. "It doesn't understand time as sequential," Celine realized, her consciousness partially merged with Ben's through the Omnitrix interface. "To it, all possibilities exist simultaneously. We need some form of temporal order," Ben insisted. "Or biological life can't function. Evolution requires sequential causality." The dimensional consciousness responded with a compromise: areas of Nexus would follow strict temporal progression, while others would maintain temporal flexibility, allowing for regions where past, present and future existed in fluid relationship. Hours or days passed as they continued this strange collaboration, gradually establishing a set of physical laws complex enough to support the diversity of life they hoped to preserve, while flexible enough to accommodate the dimension's own nature. Just as stability seemed within reach, catastrophe struck. The fragile integration between their defined parameters and the dimension's proto-consciousness shattered as a massive energy surge propagated through the forming reality. Their protective bubble collapsed, exposing them directly to the chaos of partially formed physics. Celine screamed as her body began breaking down again, molecular bonds losing coherence in the unstable environment. Ben grabbed her, trying to re-establish the protective field, but his own transformed state was faltering as the Omnitrix responded to the dimensional instability. With horrifying clarity, he understood what was happening. The Omnitrix's fail-safes were activating, preparing to return him to human form to prevent power overload. If that happened in this environment, both of them would die instantly. No choice, he gasped, making a desperate decision. Hold on, Celine. Drawing on reserves he'd never accessed before, Ben pushed the Omnitrix beyond its designed limitations. Instead of maintaining a single transformation, he began cycling through alien forms rapidly, each one lasting just long enough to contribute a specific ability before shifting to the next. Diamond Head materialized first, his crystalline form creating a momentary shield around Celine as molecular bonds disintegrated around them. Before the transformation could completely take hold, it shifted to feedback, absorbing the chaotic energy surges and redirecting them into more stable patterns. Ben, Celine cried, watching in horror as his body flickered between forms at impossible speed. The Omnitrix wasn't designed for this. You'll burn out your own DNA. He couldn't spare breath to respond. Each transformation lasted mere seconds, Alien X providing cosmic awareness, clockwork manipulating temporal fields, gray matter calculating quantum adjustments, atomics channeling nuclear forces, and dozens more in rapid succession. The strain was enormous. Ben could feel his consciousness fragmenting as the Omnitrix struggled to maintain coherence across multiple alien forms. Each shift brought searing pain as his molecular structure reconfigured at speeds never intended by the device's creator. But it was working. Each transformation contributed to stabilizing a different aspect of the forming dimension. Physical constants solidified, energy patterns regularized, temporal progression established itself in widening areas of the void. Celine watched in awe and terror as Ben essentially rewrote reality through sheer force of will, the Omnitrix smocking on his arm as it operated far beyond safety parameters. After what seemed like eternity, a final surge of energy radiated outward from their position. For one heart-stopping moment, everything went completely dark. Then, slowly, light returned, but not void, not nothingness, space, actual, defined space stretching in all directions. Above them, above, now had meaning. Stars winked into existence as matter coalesced from energy following the newly established physical laws. Beneath them, solid ground formed as fundamental particles organized according to the constants they'd defined. Ben collapsed to his knees, the Omnitrix finally reverting him to human form. Blood trickled from his nose and ears, the strain of multiple rapid transformations taking its toll on his body. But his eyes remained clear and alert as he looked around at what they had created. It worked, he whispered, voice hoarse. Nexus is stable. Celine knelt beside him, medical scanner already evaluating his condition. You're suffering from acute cellular degradation. The transformations will recover, he finished, managing a weak smile despite the pain. Azimuth built better than even he knew. The Omnitrix is already repairing the damage. He gestured around them. This is worth a little discomfort. The landscape continued forming as they watched, raw energy converting to matter according to the established parameters. Mountains rose in the distance, their formation occurring in minutes rather than millennia as accelerated physics brought the dimension to stability. A sky took shape overhead, its color a deeper blue than Earth's, scattered with stars visible even in daylight, an impossibility in normal space, but one of the unique properties they'd designed into Nexus. It's beautiful, Celine admitted. Professional detachment momentarily abandoned as she took in their creation. But that doesn't excuse what you did. The multiple transformations, you could have killed yourself. But I didn't. Ben stood shakily, accepting her supporting arm without comment. And now we have a sanctuary. A place where endangered species can survive regardless of what happens in our universe. Celine's expression remained concerned, but scientific curiosity quickly reasserted itself as she activated her scanner to begin documenting their surroundings. Initial readings indicate physical constants holding within 0.03% of target parameters. Atmospheric composition forming according to specifications. She paused, frowning at one reading. Though there's an unusual quantum signature I didn't expect. Ben nodded, having sensed the same anomaly through his connection to the dimension during its formation. Nexus has awareness, not sentience exactly, at least not yet, but a form of responsiveness. It's learning. Learning what, exactly? How to be a universe, I think. He gazed across the forming landscape. We provided the framework, but it's filling in the details itself. That's why the portal fought us. It wasn't just random instability. Nexus was trying to establish itself even before we arrived. Celine's expression shifted from scientific fascination to concern. If that's true, we've created something far more complex than intended. Something potentially beyond our control. Not beyond our guidance, Ben corrected. We're partners in this creation, not dictators. Nexus has its own nature. But we established its fundamental parameters. He pointed to where a river had begun forming, water condensing from the atmosphere and finding the path of least resistance downslope. Look. Hydraulic principles functioning perfectly. Our constants are holding. The scientist in Celine couldn't help but be captivated by the literal genesis unfolding around them. The accelerated physics is fascinating. We're watching processes that should take billions of years. That was intentional, Ben reminded her. We need Nexus ready to receive endangered species quickly, not eons from now. As they spoke, vegetation began sprouting across the newly formed landscape, not through biological reproduction, but emerging fully formed as the dimensions accelerated physics. Created ecosystems according to the parameters they'd established. Trees rose from bare earth, their growth visible to the naked eye. Grasslands spread like ripples across valleys. In the distance, a large body of water formed as hydrogen and oxygen combined in perfect proportion. We should establish a base camp, Celine suggested, practical concerns asserting themselves. The Omnitrix will need time to recover. And we need a stable point from which to monitor dimensional development. Ben nodded agreement, though his attention remained partially focused on their surroundings. Something didn't feel quite right, a subtle dissonance in the energy patterns flowing through the newly formed reality. There, he decided, pointing to a plateau overlooking the forming landscape. Good visibility, defensible position, stable geological foundation. They made their way across terrain that shifted and settled beneath their feet, the very ground still finding its final form. By the time they reached the plateau, Ben's strength had begun returning as the Omnitrix continued repairing cellular damage from his transformation ordeal. The plateau offered a breathtaking panorama of Nexus taking shape. From this vantage point, they could see the dimension extending for miles in every direction, diverse environments forming according to their carefully designed parameters. Forests, plains, mountain ranges, bodies of water, all emerging simultaneously as accelerated physics compressed billions of years of development into hours. Celine deployed the emergency shelter unit she'd been carrying, standard plumber equipment that expanded from pocket-sized to a fully functional habitat in minutes. The small structure wasn't luxurious, but it provided essential amenities and monitoring equipment they would need. I'm detecting some unusual energy fluctuations 2 kilometers east, she reported, studying the scanner's display with growing concern. The patterns don't match our established parameters. Ben felt it too, a discordance in the dimensional fabric, like an instrument slightly out of tune with the rest of an orchestra. Could be harmonic instabilities as the physics fully establish themselves. Or it could be Nexus developing in ways we didn't anticipate. Celine's expression reflected the same mixture of scientific fascination and wariness Ben felt. If it truly has some form of proto-consciousness, then we need to understand how it's developing. Ben checked the Omnitrix, pleased to see its energy levels stabilizing. I should be able to transform again soon. Access Brainstorm's intelligence to analyze the patterns. Celine's attention suddenly snapped to her scanner. Energy surge detected. Massive buildup of quantum potential. The ground beneath them shuddered violently, nearly knocking them off their feet. In the distance, the landscape began to ripple like liquid, physical matter temporarily reverting to energy as fundamental forces fluctuated. Reality instability, Ben shouted, grabbing Celine's arm to steady her. Something's disrupting the established parameters. The disruption intensified, waves of distortion propagating outward from a central point several kilometers away. Where these waves passed, matter briefly lost cohesion, transforming into swirling patterns of pure energy before reforming, sometimes in configurations different from their original state. It's like watching evolution in real time, Celine breathed, scientific curiosity momentarily overriding alarm. The dimension is experimenting with different manifestations of matter. Ben wasn't so easily distracted from the danger. If those distortions reach us before I can transform, we're in serious trouble. He checked the Omnitrix again, finding its recharge cycle still incomplete. We need shelter. The emergency unit won't withstand reality fluctuations of this magnitude. Celine pointed to a formation of crystalline structures that had emerged nearby. Those look stable. Their molecular lattice might resist the distortions. They ran for the crystal formation as the waves of distortion moved closer, each pulse causing more dramatic effects on the surrounding environment. Trees twisted into impossible shapes, rock formations melted and reformed in defiance of normal physics, atmospheric composition shifted unpredictably. Reaching the crystals, they pressed themselves against the largest formation, hoping its complex molecular structure would provide some protection. The distortion wave approached with inexorable progress, transforming everything in its path. If we don't survive this, Celine said suddenly, her voice calm despite the circumstances, I want you to know I've never regretted working with you, Ben Tennyson. Even when your ideas were completely insane. Ben smiled despite the danger. Coming from you, Doc, that might be the nicest thing you've ever said to me. The distortion reached them before she could respond. Reality itself seemed to dissolve around them as fundamental forces temporarily suspended operation. Ben felt his body losing cohesion, molecular bonds weakening as the wave passed through the crystal and into their physical forms. In that moment of dissolution, something unexpected happened. Rather than destroying them, the distortion wave seemed to interface directly with their consciousness. Ben experienced a sensation of vast awareness, not communication exactly, but recognition. As if Nexus itself was acknowledging their presence, examining them at a fundamental level. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the distortion passed, reality reformed around them, physical laws reasserting themselves with stable precision. But something had changed. Do you feel that? Celine asked quietly, her scientific detachment momentarily abandoned in wonder. Ben nodded, experiencing the same phenomenon. Where before they had been visitors to Nexus, now they felt connected to it, not merged or absorbed, but recognized. Integrated, as if the dimension had examined their pattern and decided to include it in its developing reality. It was studying us, he realized. Learning what we are so it could accommodate our existence. Celine's scanner confirmed his intuition. The physical constants have adjusted slightly, still within our original parameters, but optimized for human biological functions. Atmospheric composition, temperature ranges, gravitational constant, all fine-tuned to human comfort levels. Nexus isn't just accepting our guidance, Ben said slowly, understanding dawning. It's actively adapting to support us. Quote, the implications were staggering. They had created not just a passive dimension operating according to predetermined rules, but an actively responsive real it. Why capable of adjusting itself to support the life forms it contained. This changes everything, Celine whispered, the scientist in her already calculating new possibilities. If Nexus can adapt to human requirements without sacrificing fundamental stability, then it can potentially adapt to any species we introduce, Ben finished. Creating perfect environmental conditions without requiring separate habitats or terraforming. Around them, the landscape had stabilized, no longer shifting with visible speed but settled into forms that followed natural physical laws. The accelerated development phase appeared complete, leaving a fully realized environment ready for habitation. Ben activated his communicator, attempting to establish connection with their home reality. Static greeted him, punctuated by occasional fragments of signal, not enough for communication, but evidence that the dimensional boundaries remained permeable to certain energy frequencies. We need to establish a stable portal, he decided. Now that Nexus has reached equilibrium, we should be able to create a controlled connection without risking either reality. The Omnitrix had finally completed its recovery cycle, the display glowing with steady green light indicating full functionality. Ben selected a transformation carefully, considering which alien form would be most useful for the delicate work of interdimensional connection. A flash of green light enveloped him as the transformation took hold. When it receded, he stood as Brainstorm, the cerebrocrustacean's enhanced intelligence and electroky. NETIC abilities perfectly suited for manipulating the dimensional fabric. Preliminary analysis suggests optimal portal coordinates approximately 3.7 kilometers from our current position, he announced. The formal speech patterns of this form taking over. A naturally occurring dimensional thin point has developed during Nexus's formation phase. Celine consulted her scanner, confirming his assessment. Energy readings are consistent with your theory. The dimensional barrier is measurably thinner at those coordinates. They made their way across the now stable landscape, marveling at the complete ecosystems that had formed in mere hours. Forests stood fully mature, their canopies teeming with the sounds of insects and small animals that had spontaneously emerged as the accelerated physics created ecological balance. Lakes sparkled with clear water, already supporting aquatic life. The sky above had settled into a permanent twilight state, stars visible despite ambient daylight. 10. The unique properties they had designed into Nexus. Reaching the coordinates, they found themselves in a clearing surrounded by crystalline formations similar to those that had sheltered them during the distortion wave. Here, the very air seemed to shimmer with potential, light bending in subtle ways that suggested weakened dimensional boundaries. Fascinating, Brainstorm commented, his CED intellect perceiving patterns invisible to normal senses. The dimensional fabric naturally thinned at this precise location, creating an ideal junction point between realities. Almost as if Nexus intentionally created a door, Celine finished, the implication clear. It wants connection with our universe. Indeed, a most intriguing development that suggests a level of intentionality beyond our original projections. Brainstorm activated the electrokinetic abilities inherent to his species, channeling precisely calculated energy patterns into the dimensional thin point. The air between the crystal formations began to ripple, then split, revealing the familiar outlines of their laboratory, or rather, what remained of it after their uncontrolled departure. Portal stabilized, he announced with satisfaction. Dimensional integrity maintaining within acceptable parameters. We have successfully established controlled connection between Nexus and Earth. Celine approached the portal cautiously, her scanner confirming that passage would be safe. Through the opening, they could see the damaged laboratory, emergency containment protocols having sealed the room after their departure. Remarkably, despite the violent implosion that accompanied the portal's collapse, much of their equipment remained intact. We did it, she said quietly, professional detachment momentarily giving way to genuine emotion. We actually created a stable pocket dimension. Ben reverted to human form, the Omnitrix timing out as if sensing the completion of their immediate task. Not just stable, responsive, adaptable, he gazed around at the vibrant reality they had helped create. Nexus is more than we imagined, Celine. It's not just a sanctuary, it's a partner. She nodded, already calculating next steps with characteristic pragmatism. We'll need to establish proper monitoring stations, run comprehensive stability tests, develop protocols for species introduction. Her voice trailed off as she realized Ben was smiling at her. What? Nothing, he replied, just appreciating your ability to immediately start planning logistics when we've just participated in the literal creation of a universe. Someone has to think about the practical details, she countered, though a hint of a smile tugged at her lips. Your visionary ideas need operational frameworks. The moment of shared accomplishment stretched between them, deepening a partnership forged through years of professional collaboration and now tempered by shared creation. Something had changed in their relationship, a boundary crossed. Though neither was prepared to define exactly what that meant. Celine broke the silence first, returning to the comfortable territory of scientific analysis. We should LLECT baseline data before returning to Earth. Establish monitoring equipment at key locations to track Nexus's continued development. Ben nodded agreement, but his attention had shifted to something else, a subtle resonance he felt through his connection with the Omnitrix. There's something. He closed his eyes, focusing on the sensation. Nexus is trying to communicate. Through the Omnitrix. Not exactly. It's more like. He struggled to find words for the experience. Remember when the distortion wave passed through us? That moment of recognition. I think Nexus is attempting to establish a more permanent connection. Before Celine could respond, the ground beneath them illuminated with intricate patterns of energy, not threatening, but purposeful. The patterns spread outward, forming a complex network that reminded Ben of neural pathways or circuit boards, but far more organic in design. It's creating an interface, Celine realized, scanner recording the phenomenon. A physical manifestation of its awareness. Quote, the patterns continued spreading until they surrounded the portal completely, then began pulsing with rhythmic precision. With each pulse, data flowed through the Omnitrix, not as words or images but as pure conceptual understanding. It's thanking us, Ben translated, the meaning becoming clear as he interpreted the alien consciousness. For providing structure, for establishing parameters that allowed it to develop. But it's also, he paused, concentrating on the less distinct impressions. Warning us. No, not warning exactly. Informing us that it will continue to grow, to evolve. That what we've created is just the beginning. Essentially telling us that it has a mind of its own, Celine summarized, a hint of dry humor in her voice despite the extraordinary situation. Remarkable. We came to create a controlled environment, and instead established a new form of intelligence. The energy patterns pulsed once more, then gradually faded back into the ground. Though Ben sensed the connection remained, dormant rather than severed. The message had been delivered. Nexus had made itself known not as a passive reality to be shaped, but as an active participant in its own development. I think, Ben said slowly, that our sanctuary project just got significantly more complicated. Celine's response was interrupted by alarms from her scanner. Energy fluctuations detected in the portal. The dimensional connection is destabilizing. The portal between Nexus and Earth had indeed begun to fluctuate, its edges becoming indistinct as T. He carefully established parameters shifted unpredictably. Through the opening, they could see their laboratory equipment responding to the instability, emergency systems activating as energy levels spiked. Something's interfering with the connection, Ben realized, the Omnitrix already cycling in response to his unspoken command. We need to stabilize it before. He never finished the sentence. With a sound like thunder compressed into a single deafening crack, the portal collapsed completely. The backlash sent them both flying backward, landing hard on the crystalline ground as energy discharged in brilliant flares. When they regained their feet, the dimensional thin point remained, but the active connection was gone. Nexus had severed the link to Earth. What happened? Celine demanded, checking her scanner for answers. All parameters were within stable range, then suddenly, nothing. Complete connection failure. Ben didn't immediately respond, his attention focused on the sensation flowing through his link with Nexus. Not words, not even concepts this time, but something more fundamental, emotion. Or the closest equivalent a dimensional consciousness could experience. It's afraid, he said finally. Certainty in his voice. Or, not afraid exactly, cautious. Something about the connection concerned it. Concerned a pocket dimension. Skepticism edged Celine's voice. Ben, we're talking about a reality we created less than 12 hours ago. It can't possibly have developed enough awareness to make judgments about interdimensional connections. I think we significantly underestimated what we were creating, Ben countered. From the moment the first portal formed, Nexus has demonstrated awareness beyond our projections. What if it's been evolving alongside physical reality? Developing at the same accelerated rate? The possibility gave even Celine pause. If the dimension's consciousness had evolved at the same pace as its physical properties, compressing billions of years of development into hours, then its current state might be far beyond their initial models. Assume you're right, she said finally. Why would Nexus cut the connection? What could it possibly perceive as threatening? Quote, Ben shook his head, the answer elusive despite his connection to the dimension. I don't know, but I intend to find out. He activated the Omnitrix, cycling Hero alien forms until finding the one best suited for direct interface with the dimensional consciousness. I need to establish clearer communication. A flash of green light accompanied his transformation into Upgrade. The galvanic mechamorph's unique ability to interface with technology providing the best chance to connect with Nexus's quasi-digital consciousness. This might take some time, he warned Celine. Maintain scanner monitoring in case of further instability. Without waiting for her response, Upgrade extended his amorphous form into the crystalline structures surrounding the dimensional thin point. These formations had demonstrated unusual properties during the distortion wave, possibly serving as natural conduits for Nexus's developing awareness. Contact was immediate and overwhelming. Information flooded his consciousness at rates beyond even Upgrade's enhanced processing capabilities. Fragments of understanding flickered through his awareness. Nexus wasn't simply a pocket dimension operating according to established parameters. It was a nexus point in the truest sense, a junction where multiple realities intersected. The portal they had established hadn't connected solely to Earth, but potentially to countless other dimensions simultaneously. Nexus had detected these additional connections and sealed the portal to prevent uncontrolled access, not out of fear for itself, but concern for the vulnerable species it had been created to protect. Upgrade withdrew from the interface, the transformation reverting as the Omnitrix timed out. Ben stumbled slightly, steadied by Celine's quick reaction. "What happened?" "You were connected for nearly 20 minutes, she informed him, concern evident in her voice. "Your vital signs were all over the place." 20 minutes. The subjective experience had felt like seconds. Nexus's temporal properties are more fluid than we realized. "But I understand now why it closed the portal." He explained what he'd earned, how their creation had developed into something far more complex than intended, a dimensional crossroads with potential connections to multiple realities. It was protecting itself, he concluded. And by extension, protecting the function we designed it for, a sanctuary for endangered species. Uncontrolled interdimensional access would compromise that purpose. Celine absorbed this information with the measured consideration of a scientist encountering unexpected data. "If you're right, we can't simply re-establish the portal without addressing these additional connections. We need a more sophisticated approach to dimensional boundaries." Ben nodded agreement. "The good news is that Nexus is actively cooperating with our core mission. It wants to serve as a sanctuary, it's just implementing additional safeguards we hadn't considered." "So what's our next step?" "Without a stable portal, we're effectively stranded here." "Not stranded," Ben corrected. "Nexus responded to my interface. It understands our need to return to Earth and is willing to establish a controlled connection, but on terms that protect its integrity." He led her back to the dimensional thin point, where THE crystalline formations had begun glowing with internal light, responding to their presence. The patterns they had observed earlier reappeared, forming an intricate network across the ground. "It wants an exchange," Ben explained, interpreting the conceptual communication flowing through his connection with the dimension. "Our knowledge of endangered species in exchange for passage back to Earth. A formal agreement rather than uncontrolled access. A negotiated treaty with a newborn universe," Celine summarized, a hint of wonder breaking through her scientific detachment. "I never expected first contact protocols would apply to our own creation." Ben placed his hand on the central crystal formation, the Omnitrix responding with synchronous pulses of green energy. "I'm establishing the parameters it's requesting. Controlled access points, specific protocols for species introduction, recognition of Nexus's autonomy while maintaining our stewardship role." The crystal network flared with brilliant light as the agreement took form, not as written terms but as shared understanding between creators and creation. When the light faded, a new portal had formed, smaller than their first attempt, precisely defined, and stable in a way their emergency exit had not been. Through this opening, they could see a plumber facility rather than their damaged laboratory, specifically, the secure containment area where the first endangered species had been prepared for evacuation to the sanctuary. "It's ready," Ben said quietly, profound satisfaction in his voice. "Nexus isn't just accepting our mission, it's actively facilitating it." Celine studied the portal with the careful scrutiny of a scientist verifying experimental results. Dimensional boundaries are holding with perfect stability. Energy signature matches Earth's quantum frequency exactly. No evidence of the multiple connections you detected earlier. Nexus is controlling access precisely, maintaining separate connections rather than a single multidimensional portal. Ben gestured toward the opening. "Shall we introduce ourselves to our colleagues? I imagine they've been somewhat concerned about our disappearance." Before stepping through, Celine paused, looking back at the vibrant reality stretching beyond their position. "We should name this location. The first established connection point between Nexus and Earth deserves official designation." Ben considered, gaze taking in the crystalline formations, the dimensional thin point, the evidence of Nexus's first attempt to communicate directly with its creators. Genesis Point, he decided. Where it all began. Appropriate, Celine agreed. Both scientifically accurate and suitably dramatic for my taste. Ben finished, echoing her earlier comment with a smile. I was going to say, historically significant, but yes, that too. Together they stepped through the portal, crossing the threshold between their creation and their home reality. Behind them, Nexus continued its development. No longer just a sanctuary designed by human minds, but a partner in preserving the diversity of life throughout the multiverse. On the Earth's side, alarms immediately sounded as sensors detected their arrival. Armed plumbers rushed into the containment area, weapons trained on the unexpected portal until recognition dawned. Stand down, ordered a FAML, IAR voice as Magister Tennyson pushed through the security team. That's my grandson. The portal stabilized behind them, maintaining its connection without the catastrophic energy discharges that had accompanied their first attempt. Nexus was learning, adapting, perfecting its interactions with conventional reality. Ben, Dr. Thorne, Max Tennyson approached, relief evident beneath his professional demeanor. You've been missing for 3 days. The laboratory was completely destroyed. We feared the worst. 3 days. Celine exchanged glances with Ben. Temporal differential is more significant than we calculated. We experienced approximately 12 hours at most. Max's expression shifted from relief to concern. Your experiment was successful, Ben interrupted. More successful than we anticipated. Nexus is stable, functional, and ready to receive the endangered species we've been collecting. As if responding to his words, the containment units housing the crystalline entities, refugees from a destroyed world who would be the first inhabitants of their sanctuary, began to resonate in harmony with the portal's energy signature. They sense it, Celine observed. The dimensional frequency is compatible with their crystalline structure. They recognize Nexus as suitable habitat. Max studied the portal with the caution of experienced command. Is it safe? Your prelim. Anari reports suggested significant risks in establishing stable dimensional connections. It's not just safe, Ben assured him. It's actively cooperating with our mission. Nexus has developed NDR initial parameters. It's become a partner rather than just a project. He placed his hand on the nearest containment unit, feeling the crystalline entities respond to his proximity. Through his connection with Nexus, he sensed the dimension's anticipation, its readiness to welcome these first refugees, to fulfill its purpose as sanctuary and preservation. We've created something extraordinary, Grandpa, he said quietly. Not just a place, but a possibility. A future for species that would otherwise be lost forever. As the plumbers began preparation protocols for the first transfer, Ben felt Nexus's consciousness touch his awareness once more, not with words or even concepts this time, but with something that could only be described as purpose. A shared vision of preservation and renewal, of life continuing despite cosmic catastrophe. Genesis had been achieved. Now the real work could begin. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, Sanctuary. 6 months changed everything and nothing. Seasons shifted on Earth while Ben Tennyson existed between worlds. Winter had surrendered to spring, then summer blazed into early autumn, yet such terrestrial cycles meant little in Nexus, where time flowed according to rules Ben himself had helped establish. The pocket universe maintained a perpetual equilibrium, each environment perfectly balanced according to the needs of its inhabitants rather than the arbitrary dictates of seasonal orbit. Ben stood at the edge of the crystalline cliffs overlooking what the inhabitants now called the luminal sea. Morning light, or what passed for morning. In a realm where conventional day-night cycles were optional, fractured through the atmosphere into prismatic cascades. The crystal entities floated near the shore, their translucent bodies absorbing specific wavelengths and refracting others, communicating in patterns of light too complex for most species to comprehend. They're discussing philosophical concepts again, observed Drive. Celine Thorne, approaching from behind with silent steps. Her standard plumber uniform had given way to attire more suited to Nexus's unique environments, adaptive fabrics that adjusted temperature and pressure according to surrounding conditions. Integrated sensor arrays disguised as decorative patterns. Something about the nature of existence is vibrational frequency. Apparently, they've developed 300 and 17 distinct theories since arriving. Ben smiled without turning. They've been philosophizing since before mammals evolved on Earth. Hard habit to break, even after near extinction. Speaking of habits, Celine continued, moving to stand beside him at the cliff edge. The council's waiting. Third time this week you've disappeared right before a scheduled meeting. Not disappeared, just. He gestured toward the crystalline entities. Checking on our first guests. Making sure they're adapting. They adapted perfectly within 48 hours of arrival. Their silicon ed biology resonates with Nexus's fundamental frequencies at 98% harmony. Her tone held the precision of scientific fact but softened as she added, "You're avoiding the bureaucracy." Guilty. Ben finally turned to face her, shadows of exhaustion visible beneath his eyes despite his smile. 6 months of meetings, protocols, documentation. Sometimes I need to remember why we created this place. Celine studied him with the careful observation she typically reserved for her research subjects. The past months had changed them both. Where Ben had once been constantly in motion, now he cultivated stillness, watching, listening, connecting with Nexus in ways that transcended spoken language. For her part, Celine had softened some of her rigorous empiricism, learning to accept phenomena that defied conventional scientific explanation. The Transference Committee has prepared 3 new species for evacuation, she informed him, professional demeanor returning. The Plumber. Advance team reports their home planets won't survive the week. Ben's expression shifted, weariness giving way to renewed purpose. What are we looking at? Atmospheric dispersal on TERROS-9, oceanic acidification on Hydros. And the Vorsians have nearly completed consumption of Arbora's core. 3 completely different environmental requirements. Ben ran calculations mentally, mapping Zus's available territories against the needs of the incoming refugees. The eastern quadrant of Aquos sector can accommodate the Hydrosians. We'll need to increase salinity and pressure gradients, but that's straightforward. The Arborans will integrate well with the northern forest canopy, symbiotic relationship possible with the existing flora. The Terrosians. He paused, considering. The volcanic plains haven't fully stabilized. We'll need to accelerate formation to create proper gas exchange mechanisms. Celine nodded, making notes on her datapad. I've already assigned technical teams to begin preparations. But the council needs your approval for final implementation. Of course they do, Ben muttered, more resignation than bitterness in his voice. Political structures, the UNIV. Arsa's most persistent constant across realities. Together they made their way from the cliff observation point toward the central settlement that had emerged organically near Genesis Point, the Origi Null portal location that now served as Nexus's primary connection to Earth. What had begun as a simple monitoring station had evolved into a complex of structures reflecting multiple architectural influences. As representatives from various planets contributed to Nexus's development as both sanctuary and research center. The settlement, named Concordia after lengthy debate among council members, BUSTLED with activity that defied easy categorization. Plumber scientists collaborated with alien scholars from a dozen worlds. Engineers from Earth worked alongside refugees who'd brought their own technological expertise. What might have been chaos instead functioned with remarkable harmony, different species finding common purpose in Nexus's preservation mission. Ben and Celine moved through the central plaza, where gravity had been adjusted to a universal median comfortable for most bipedal species. Holographic displays hovered at various heights, showing real-time data from throughout Nexus, environmental readings, population distributions, energy flow patterns. The massive central projection depicted the entire pocket universe in miniature, a 3-dimensional representation that rotated slowly, highlighting the 5 distinct sectors they had established. Several researchers nodded respectfully as Ben passed, a gesture he acknowledged while maintaining a deliberate casualness. The reverence some showed toward him as Nexus's creator remained uncomfortable, a reminder of responsibilities he'd never sought but couldn't escape. The council chamber occupied the settlement's highest point, its transparent dome affording panoramic views of the surrounding landscape while symbolizing the commitment to transparency in governance. Inside, representatives from Earth's Plumber Command, The rescued species now residing in Nexus, and key scientific divisions were already assembled around the circular table at the chamber's center. Architect Tennyson greeted Magister Patellidae, the amphibian plumber's voice carrying the formal tone he reserved for official functions. We were beginning to consider sending a search party. Just checking environmental harmonics in the crystal territories, Ben replied smoothly. Taking his designated seat, the philosopher Clades have developed some interesting theories about dimensional resonance that might improve our integration protocols for silicon-based lifeforms. A technical truth, though not his primary reason for the visit. Ben had discovered early that couching his need for solitude in scientific terminology effectively deflected criticism from the more bureaucratically minded council members. Fascinating, I'm sure, said Magister Patellidae, transparent skepticism in his tone. Perhaps we could proceed with today's agenda. 3 species awaiting evacuation, deteriorating conditions on their home planets, rather time-sensitive situation. The meeting proceeded with the efficient formality that had developed over months of practice. Environmental specialists presented adaptation requirements for each incoming species. Security officers outlined potential territorial conflicts or biological incompatibilities. Resource managers calculated energy requirements for dimensional transference. Ben listened attentively, asking relevant questions and offering insights from his unique connection to Nexus itself. Pocket Universe responded differently to his presence than to others, a fact objectively verified through numerous experiments, though the underlying mechanism remained elusive even to Galvan analysis. The Arborans present a potential complication, noted Drive. Pacos, the xenobotanist who joined the project 3 months prior. The Florana hybrid gestured toward the relevant section of the holographic display. Their root systems extend to nearly 300 meters depth and secrete compounds that may disrupt native soil chemistry in the Northern Territories. Adjust the soil microbiome, Ben suggested immediately. Introduce buffer species in descending layers, creating transition zones rather than direct contact. Dr. Pacos blinked multiple stem eyes in surprise. That's exactly the solution I was going to propose. The calculations would be complex, however. I've already run them, Ben interrupted, sending the data from his personal device to the central display. Complex mathematical models appeared, showing soil chemistry projections across multiple time scales. Nexus provided the frameworks. The integration will be stable within 17 days if we implement these buffers immediately. Silence followed this pronouncement, the sort of pause that had become increasingly common during council meetings. Ben's deepening connection with Nexus itself, his ability to perceive solutions through direct environmental communion rather than conventional analysis, remained unsettling to some council members, particularly those with traditional scientific backgrounds. Very well, Magister Patellidae said finally. Xenobotany Division will implement Architect Tennyson's recommendations. Now, regarding the atmospheric requirements for the Terosians. A sudden alert interrupted the proceedings. Priority signals flashing across the central display. Communications Officer Tarax activated the emergency channel, her forearms moving across the controls with practiced efficiency. In scheduled portal activation at Genesis Point, she reported, translucent skin pulsing with alarm chromatophores. Single vessel approach. No advance notification or clearance codes. The room erupted into controlled activity. Security protocols engaged automatically, defensive systems activating throughout Concordia while data streams from the monitoring stations near Genesis Point filled the displays. Visual confirmation. Ben requested, already moving toward the exit with Magister Patellidae and Celine close behind. Incoming now, Officer Tarax confirmed, transferring the feed to their personal devices. Single occupant vessel, unknown configuration. Minimal weapons signatures detected. The image showed a sleek craft of unfamiliar design, its hull composed of overlapping plates that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. The vessel had emerged from the Genesis Point portal and immediately adopted a non-aggressive posture, powering down weapons systems. ND maintaining stationary position well within the range of Concordia's defensive batteries. How did they access Genesis Point? Celine demanded as they hurried through Concordia's central corridor toward the defense center. Portal coordinates are classified at the highest security level. More importantly, added Magister Patellidae, how did they convince Nexus to allow entry? The dimension. All barriers have their own protection protocols independent of our security systems. Ben didn't respond immediately, his attention focused on something beyond the immediate crisis, a subtle shift in Nexus itself. A pattern in the dimension's underlying energy signature that suggested recognition rather than alarm. "It's not hostile," he said with quiet certainty as they reached the defense center. The large chamber hummed with activity as security personnel monitored systems and prepared response protocols. "Nexus recognizes the vessel, or its occupant. With respect, Architect," said Chief Security Officer Vega, a retired Petrosapian warrior whose crystalline body had been partially shattered during the defense of her home world. "Nexus has been known to exhibit unusual responses to certain energy signatures. We cannot rely solely on dimensional intuition when security protocols have been breached." "Agreed," Ben conceded. "Maintain defensive posture but hold weapons lock. Let's see what our visitor wants before we start an interstellar incident." The communication systems activated, establishing connection with the unknown vessel. For several seconds, only static filled the channel. Then, a voice emerged, melodic yet precise, each word carefully enunciated with an accent impossible to place. "Sanctuary Control, this is Scholar Nyota Zeph requesting permission to approach. I come seeking asylum and knowledge exchange." Something in the voice triggered recognition in Ben, though he was certain he'd never heard it before. From the corner of his eye, he noticed Selen E studying him with scientific curiosity. "Identifying frequency patterns," announced one of the technical officers. "Vessel composition unknown, but design elements suggest transcription influence." Ben felt his pulse quicken. "Transcription? That's impossible. The entire system was destroyed in the quantum cascade 3 years ago. No survivors were reported. Evidently, reports were incomplete," Celine observed dryly. "What's your call?" Ben made his decision. "Escort Configuration Alpha. Full biohazard protocols until identity and intentions are verified. I'll meet our visitor personally." "Architect." Security Chief Vega began to protest. "Not negotiable, Chief," Ben interrupted firmly. "If this truly is a transcription survivor, then her arrival is exactly why we created Nexus in the first place." Preparations moved with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, Ben stood in the arrival chamber adjacent to Genesis Point, Celine in a security detail positioned strategically nearby. The portal itself pulsed with steady rhythm, its energy signature reflecting Nexus's continued willingness to maintain the connection despite the unauthorized access, a phenomenon Ben found increasingly fascinating. The visitor's vessel completed its approach under escort, settling onto the designated platform with precision that spoke of considerable piloting skill. Up close, the craft's Sual properties became more apparent. Its surface seemed to shift subtly, adapting to the surrounding environmental conditions like a living organism rather than manufactured technology. A seam appeared along the vessel's side, widening to form an entry portal. A figure emerged slowly, movements deliberate and careful in Nexus's gravity. Scholar Nyota Zeph stood perhaps 5.5 feet tall, her slender build belying the inherent strength evident in her controlled movements. Her skin held a luminescent quality that shifted subtly with her breathing, pale gold in shadow, deep amber in direct light. Most striking were her eyes, large, with no discernible pupils, instead filled with what appeared to be swirling galaxies in miniature, stars and nebulae moving in constant patterns. She wore simple attire that nonetheless suggested complexity beyond its appearance, a fitted bodysuit of material similar to her vessel's hull, adaptive and responsive. Around her neck hung an intricate pendant that emitted a subtle pulse of energy detectable even to non-enhanced senses. "Architect Tennyson," she said, her voice even more melodic in person than over communications. "I apologize for my unannounced arrival. Circumstances necessitated creative approaches to travel security." Ben studied her with unconcealed fascination. The transcriptions had been legendary even before their destruct. Tian, a species dedicated to knowledge preservation, their neural structures evolved specifically for perfect recall and information synthesis. Each individual carried specialized knowledge, their call, active forming a living library of unparalleled scope. And all of them, according to every official record, had perished when their star system collapsed. "Scholar Zeph," he acknowledged finally. "Nexus welcomes you, though we have questions about how you found us and accessed our portal network." A smile touched her lips, revealing teeth with the same luminescent quality as her skin. I followed information pathways. Data, like energy, leaves traces when it moves between systems. Your sanctuary project created distinctive patterns, beautiful in their complexity, once you know how to perceive them. She gestured toward the pendant at her throat. This contains what remains of Transcriptia's central archive, compressed, of course, but intact. When one specializes in information storage and retrieval, very little remains truly hidden. Celine stepped forward, scanner discreetly evaluating their visitor. Our portal system has 18 distinct security protocols, including quantum ENC, Ription and dimensional frequency modulation. 19. Actually, Nyota corrected gently. You're not counting Nexus itself as a security measure. The dimension recognized my approach as non-threatening and permitted conditional access. Her galaxy-filled eyes turned to Ben. You created something remarkable, architect. Something with discernment beyond conventional parameters. Ben felt an unexpected connection to this stranger, not attraction precisely, but recognition. Something in her perception of Nexus resonated with his own experience. You mentioned asylum, he said, returning to her initial transmission. Are you in danger, Scholar Zeph? Her expression shifted, the luminescence of her skin dimming slightly. I am the last of my kind, Architect Tennyson. That alone places me in perpetual danger. Transcriptions were valued for our knowledge, and now that value is concentrated in a single target. She gestured toward her vessel. I've evaded 3 separate capture attempts in the past month alone. Raiders, collectors, information brokers, all seeking to acquire what I contain. What exactly do you contain? Celine asked, scientific curiosity overcoming initial caution. Everything, Nyota replied simply. Transcription neural structures allow perfect recall of all experienced information. As primary archivist, I was responsible for integrating the collective knowledge of our people, our history, sciences, arts, philosophies. When the quantum cascade began, our council enacted the Emergency Preservation Protocol. All archivists transferred their specialized knowledge to me before evacuation attempts. Quote, a shadow passed across her luminescent features. I was the only transport to escape the system before collapse. 26,000 years of civilization, he collective knowledge of 11 billion individuals, now exists solely in my memory and the compressed backup I wear. The implications stunned even the seasoned plumbers present. A single living being carrying the complete cultural and scientific legacy of an advanced civilization, the value was incalculable, the responsibility unimaginable. Nexus was created precisely for cases like yours, Scholar Zeph. Ben said after a moment of respectful silence. You're welcome to stay as long as necessary, though standard protocols will apply: medical evaluation, information exchange, territory assignment. Relief visibly washed through her, the galaxies in her eyes spinning in what Ben somehow recognized as gratitude. Thank you, Architect. In return, I offer my services as information specialist. My primary function has always been knowledge preservation and exchange. An exchange we gratefully accept, Ben replied formally, then added with genuine warmth, and please, when we're not in official functions, it's just Ben. Just Ben, she repeated, a hint of amusement in her musical voice. Informality, a concept my people always found fascinating but rarely practiced. I shall attempt adaptation. Her galaxy eyes sparkled, and you may call me Nyota, when formality is unnecessary. The initial meeting concluded with standard procedures: security scans, preliminary medical evaluation, assignment of temporary quarters. Throughout the process, Ben found himself increasingly intrigued by their visitor. Nyota moved through Concordia with the measured wonder of a scholar encountering new knowledge, observing, analyzing, categorizing, while maintaining a dignified composure that somehow never seemed cold or detached. Later that evening, after handling the inevitable administrative requirements that accompanied an unscheduled arrival, Ben found himself returning to the crystal cliffs where his day had begun. The luminal sea reflected Nexus's unique constellations, star patterns. Designed specifically for this pocket dimension, navigational markers for a reality that operated according to its own rules. Your sanctuary exceeds reports, came Nyota's voice from behind him. She approached with deliberate steps, making no attempt to disguise her presence. The dimensional harmonics achieve stability patterns I would have calculated as theoretically impossible. Ben turned, unsurprised by her appearance despite the location's distance from Concordia. Most visitors need weeks to navigate beyond the settlement. You found this place in hours. Information pathways, she explained, moving to stand beside him at the cliff edge. Energy flows through Nexus in distinct patterns. Once identified, they form a navigational framework more precise than conventional mapping. The statement confirmed Ben's earlier impression. Nyota perceived aspects of Nexus that even most of his research team couldn't detect. Her specialized neural structure apparently allowed her to interpret the dimension's underlying patterns in ways similar to his own connection. You feel it too, don't you? He asked quietly. Nexus isn't just responding to programmed parameters. It's developing, evolving, becoming something beyond our original design. Nyota's galaxy eyes studied him with unexpected intensity. You speak of it as conscious. Most of your colleagues refer to Nexus as environment rather than entity. Most of my colleagues didn't participate in its creation. Ben gazed out over the luminal sea, where crystal entities continued their light-based philosophical debates. From the first moment of Genesis, Nexus exhibited qualities beyond our expectations. 6 months later, those qualities have only grown more pronounced. Yet you've told no one the full extent of your connection. Nyota observed with gentle certainty. Not even Drive Thorn, who shares creation credit in all official documentation. Ben's sharp glance prompted a soft, luminescent smile from her. Information specialist, remember, I observe patterns, including patterns of omission in official reports. Celine knows more than most, he acknowledged after a moment's hesitation. But you're right, there are aspects of my relationship with Nexus that I haven't fully disclosed. The Council already struggles with the concept of a responsive dimension. If they understood how deeply the connection runs, they would fear what they cannot measure. Nyota completed his thought. A common response across species. Knowledge categorized as knowledge controlled, or so the illusion suggests. Silence settled between them, comfortable rather than awkward. Below, the crystal entities shifted configurations, their light patterns creating momentary mandalas of extraordinary complexity across the water's surface. Why did you really come to Nexus? Ben asked finally. With your knowledge and abilities, you could have hidden anywhere in the galaxy, established yourself among countless civilizations who would value your archives. The luminescence of her skin dimmed slightly as she considered her response. Because archives without context eventually become merely data. Information requires living cultures to remain meaningful. She gestured toward the vastness of Nexus spreading beyond the cliffs. You're creating something unprecedented. Architect, a preservation project not just for individual species but for cultural interaction and evolution. Her galaxy eyes met his directly. The last transcription carrying the last transcription archive belongs in the last refuge for endangered knowledge. Symmetry, if nothing else. Quote. Ben found himself smiling at the elegant simplicity of her reasoning. Well, when you put it that way. Their conversation might have continued, but an ALRT from Ben's communication device interrupted the moment. Celine's voice emerged, crisp and professional as always. Ben, we're picking up unusual energy signatures in Aquos sector. Patterns suggest spontaneous biological activity in previously uninhabited regions. The Council is requesting your presence. On my way, he responded, then glanced at Nyota. Duty calls. We'll continue this conversation later. I look forward to it. She replied with formal politeness that nonetheless carried genuine interest. Knowledge exchange benefits from incremental development. The journey back to sea. Encordia gave Ben time to consider their new arrival and her potential impact on Nexus's development. Nyota Zeph represented exactly the kind of preservation case they'd designed the sanctuary to echo. Modate, the last of an endangered species carrying irreplaceable cultural knowledge. Yet her abilities and perspective offered something beyond mere preservation. Her understanding of information systems and pattern recognition might provide insights into Nexus itself that even his team of brilliant scientists had missed. The Council had assembled by the time he arrived, tension evident in the Amber despite attempts at professional composure. Holographic displays showed real-time footage from Aquos sector, specifically, the deep-sea trenches they'd created to accommodate extreme pressure ADA. PTED species scheduled for future relocation. It began approximately 43 minutes ago, Celine explained, manipulating the display to highlight specific regions. Spontaneous bioluminescent activity throughout the trench system. Initial scans suggested simple algae forms, but she expanded the image, revealing complex structures that defied easy classification. These are organized biological systems emerging without seeding or introduction. Impossible, stated Drive. Pacos flatly, multiple eye stems focused on the display. Biological evolution requires either deliberate introduction or millions of years of natural development. Apparently, Nexus disagrees with that assessment, Magister Patellidae observed dryly. Unless someone has been conducting unauthorized experiments. The implication hung in the air momentarily before Ben dismissed it. All biological introductions are documented and tracked. This is something else. He studied the images, recognition dawning as he observed the patterns of development. Its adaptive response. Explain, prompted Celine, her attention shifting from the display to Ben. Nexus is preparing environments in advance of need, he elaborated. Certainty growing as he connected with the dimension's underlying patterns. We established baseline parameters for each sector, but left specific adaptation to occur as species were introduced. What we're seeing is Nexus accelerating that process independently. You're suggesting the dimension is anticipating our intentions. Magister Patellidae's tone carried healthy skepticism. Developing environmental factors before we've even finalized transfer protocols. Not anticipating, Ben corrected. Learning. Each species we've introduced has required specific environmental modifications. Nexus is analyzing those patterns and applying predictive algorithms to prepare subsequent habitats. The explanation, while scientifically framed, didn't fully capture what Ben sensed through his connection with the dimension. The spontaneous biological activity represented something more profound than simple pattern recognition. It suggested a form of creative problem solving that transcended programmed responses. Whatever the cause, Celine interjected pragmatically, we need to determine whether these spontaneous life forms present any danger to incoming species. I recommend sending a research team immediately. I'll go personally, Ben decided. These developments may reveal important insights about Nexus's adaptive capabilities. I request permission to accompany Architect Tennyson. Came a melodic voice from the chamber entrance. Nyota Zeph stood in the doorway, her galaxy eyes taking in the holographic displays with evident fascination. The transcription archive contains extensive documentation of spontaneous evolutionary phenomena across 17 galaxies. My analysis may prove useful. The council members exchanged glances, surprise evident at both her unexpected appearance and her awareness of the situation. Security protocols should have prevented her access to this information so soon after arrival. Scholar Zeph, Magister Patellidae acknowledged with careful neutrality. This is a closed council session discussing sensitive developmental anomalies. Yes, she agreed pleasantly. Spontaneous biogenesis in Aquos sector, specifically the northern trench systems. Bioluminescent organisms with complex cellular structures suggesting accelerated evolution. Fascinating development with significant implications for Nexus's long-term adaptive capabilities. Silence followed her precise summary of information she shouldn't have known. Ben suppressed a smile, recognizing the pattern recognition abilities she had described earlier. Nyota hadn't needed access to secured communications, she had simply observed energy flows and information pathways throughout Concordia, constructing accurate conclusions from minimal data points. Your expertise would be welcome, Scholar Zeph. He said before the council could raise objections. We'll depart immediately. Dr. Thorne, would you care to join us? Your xenobiology background would be valuable. Celine arched an eyebrow at his transparent attempt to prevent further council debate, but nodded agreement. I'll gather appropriate sampling equipment. The expedition departed within the hour, utilizing one of the specialized exploration vessels designed specifically for Nexus's varied environments. The craft adjusted its configuration as they descended into Aquos sector, external plotting. Shifting to accommodate increasing water pressure while internal systems maintained comfortable conditions for the occupants. Ben piloted with casual expertise born from years of experience with alien technology. Beside him, Celine monitored environmental readings with scientific precision, while Nyota observed both their activities and the passing underwater landscape with equal interest. TR. Anscription vessels employed similar adaptive technology, she noted as the craft reconfigured for a particularly dramatic pressure increase. Though our approach favored biological integration rather than mechanical transformation. Living ships? Celine asked, scientific curiosity temporarily overriding her reserved demeanor. Semi-organic, Nyota clarified. Synthetic biology with consciousness integration. The vessels maintained symbolic relationship with pilots, shared purpose rather than command structure. A faint smile touched her luminescent features. My personal transport incorpor. Attach several examples of such technology, though significantly compressed for practicality. I'd love to examine it sometime, Celine said with genuine interest. Our bio-integration research has several roadblocks with neural interface compatibility. Knowledge exchange would be my pleasure, Dr. Nyota's galaxy eyes shifted to Ben. Though I suspect the architect already understands he fundamental principle through his connection with Nexus itself. Ben felt Celine's gaze shift to him, sharp with sudden interest. What do you mean by that? She asked Nyota, though her eyes remained on Ben. Merely observation, Nyota replied smoothly. The dimension responds differently to his presence, a fact documented in multiple research reports. Such resonance suggests neural compatibility beyond conventional parameters. The moment of potential tension was interrupted by the vessel's proximity alerts. They had reached the trench system where the anomalous biological activity had been detected. Ben guided the craft lower, external illumination cutting through the abyssal darkness to reveal a landscape transformed. What had been barren geological formations just days earlier now pulsed with vibrant life. Bioluminescent organisms carpeted the trench walls in complex patterns that shifted and flowed like liquid mathematics. Colors impossible in Earth's oceans manifested in hypnotic sequences, ultraviolet, infrared, and spectra beyond standard visual range, perceivable only through the vessel's enhanced sensors. Extraordinary, breathed Celine, all professional detachment. Momentarily abandoned in pure scientific wonder. The cellular organization, the energy efficiency, these organisms shouldn't exist. The evolutionary pathways required to produce such structures would take millions of years. Unless evolution itself is operating according to different parameters, Ben suggested, guiding the vessel closer to the trench wall. Nexus doesn't just replicate conventional physics, it optimizes them. Nyota studied the patterns with intense concentration, her galaxy eyes reflecting the bioluminescent displays. These aren't random developments. The organisms reforming communication structures, information pathways similar to those I observed throughout Concordia, but biological rather than energy-based. Communication with what? Celine asked, adjusting sensors to capture more detailed readings. The answer came not from either of her companions, but from Nexus itself. The bioluminescent patterns suddenly shifted, organizing into more deliberate configurations that pulsed with increasing intensity. The vessel's systems responded automatically, translating the light patterns into data streams that filled the main display. It's a message, Ben realized, watching the translation algorithms attempt to process the incoming information. Or at least, an attempt at one. The patterns continued evolving, becoming more structured as the organisms themselves reorganized in real time, adapting their communication attempt based on the vessel's responses. Gradually, recognizable mathematical sequences emerged, prime numbers, Fibonacci patterns, simple geometric ratios. Universal communication baselines, Nyota observed, leaning forward with intense interest. The same protocols used for first contact with non-verbal species. These organisms re-establishing fundamental language parameters. But they just evolved, Celine protested. How could they possibly understand complex communication concepts? Because they didn't evolve naturally, Ben said quietly. Understanding flowing through his connection with Nexus. They were created specifically for this purpose. Nexus needed a way to communicate directly with us in environments where energy patterns wouldn't be easily detectable. So it created biological intermediaries, living communication nodes. The implications silenced even Celine's scientific skepticism. If Ben's assessment was correct, Nexus had moved beyond simple environmental adaptation into deliberate biological engineering, creating entirely new life forms to serve specific functions within its developing ecosystem. We should collect samples, Selene suggested finally, scientific methodology reasserting itself. Conduct proper analysis under controlled conditions. I'm not sure that's possible, Ben replied, nodding toward where the bioluminescent organisms continued their complex displays. These life forms appear to be integrated with Nexus itself, extensions of the dimension's awareness rather than independent entities. To demonstrate his point, he established direct connection with the vessel's communication systems, sending a simple mathematical response to the patterns displayed on the trench wall. The reaction was immediate. The organisms pulsed with increased luminescence, patterns shifting to acknowledge the response and build upon it with more complex sequences. It's learning, Nyota observed with quiet fascination. Establishing communication protocols in real time. Extraordinary adaptation efficiency. For nearly an hour, they remained in position, exchanging increasingly sophisticated communication patterns with the bioluminescent organisms. The progression moved from mathematical concepts to basic symbolic representation, then to more abstract ideas, environmental conditions, biological functions. Energy distribution. Throughout the exchange, Ben felt his connection with Nexus deepening, as if the dimension was using this biological interface to establish more say communication than previously possible. The sensation wasn't intrusive but collaborative, two intelligences finding common conceptual ground. It's asking questions, he realized suddenly, interpreting patterns that had shifted from statement to inquiry formats. About the species we're planning to introduce to this environment. It wants specifications, detailed biological requirements, behavioral patterns, ecological interactions. Impossible, Selene murmured, though her tone lacked conviction. That would require comprehension of biological diversity, environmental adaptation, and predictive modeling far beyond programmed parameters, Ben finished for her. But not beyond evolving intelligence. Nexus is learning, Selene. Every species we introduce, every modification we make, it's all data. Patterns, information that can be analyzed and applied. Nyota observed their exchange with quiet interest before offering her own perspective. The transcription archive contains 27 documented cases of environmental intelligence emergence across multiple galaxies. In each instance, initial manifestation was dismissed as anomalous data or instrument error until communication protocols were established. Her galaxy eyes met Selene's directly. Scientific skepticism is valuable, drive, thorn, but flexibility in defining, impossible, equally so. Selene's expression Augusted she wasn't entirely comfortable with the gentle correction, but professional respect prevailed. Point taken, Scholar Zeph. I'll adjust my analytical framework accordingly. She turned to Ben. If Nexus is indeed requesting specific information about incoming species, we should provide it. The more accurately it understands their requirements, the better it can prepare suitable environments. Ben nodded agreement, already composing a more detailed response to the bioluminescent interface. For the next several hours, they engaged in comprehensive information exchange, transmitting data. I led biological parameters for each species scheduled for relocation to Aquos sector, while receiving what appeared to be proposals for environmental optimization in return. The dialogue progressed with remarkable efficiency, each exchange building upon previous understanding until they had essentially collaborated on complete environmental engineering specifications for the incoming aquatic species. The bioluminescent organisms responded to each transmission with increasingly sophisticated adaptations, their very structure evolving to facilitate more precise communication. We should report this to the Council, Selene said finally as they prepared to return to Concordia. The implications for our entire project are significant. Agreed, Ben replied, though something in his tone suggested reservation. But we need to frame this carefully. Some council members already have concerns about Nexus's autonomous development. Learning that it's creating biological communication interface might trigger unnecessary restrictions. You believe they would attempt to limit Nexus's natural evolution? Nyota asked, her question carrying no judgment, merely seeking information. Not limit exactly, Ben clarified, but regulate, study, potentially interfere with processes they don't fully understand. The Council's primary concern is safety, ensuring that Nexus remains a controlled environment for endangered species. Autonomous development introduces variables they can't easily predict. Yet autonomous development appears fundamental to Nexus's nature, Nyota observed. Attempting to restrict such processes might damage the very system you're trying to preserve. Precisely my concern, Ben agreed, guiding their vessel upward through the oceanic layers. We need to help the UNCIL understand that Nexus's evolution isn't a threat but an asset. These biological interfaces will allow more precise environmental adaptation for incoming species than anything we could engineer ourselves. Celine considered this perspective with characteristic thoroughness. A reasonable approach, she concluded. Though I recommend full disclosure of our observations. Selective reporting WILL only generates suspicion when further developments inevitably emerge. Their return to Concordia coincided with preparations for the next scheduled species introduction. The refugee transports from Taros 9 had arrived during their expedition, their passengers now waiting in temporary stasis while final habitat adjustments were implemented. The Council received their report with reactions ranging from fascination to concern. Though the practical benefits of Nexus's communication development ultimately outweighed theoretical worries. With endangered species arriving in increasing numbers, NY advancement that improved integration efficiency was cautiously welcomed. In the days that followed, Ben found himself dividing time between official responsibilities and increasingly frequent conversations with Nyota Zeph. The transcription's unique perspective offered insights into Nexus's development that even his experienced team couldn't provide. Her specialized neural structure allowed her to perceive patterns in the dimension's behavior that others missed entirely, while her extensive knowledge base provided context from similar phenomena across the galaxy. The crystalline Philosop, Hickle Clades have requested your presence, she informed him one morning, finding him in the research center reviewing adaptation protocols for yet another incoming species. They've developed a new theoretical framework regarding dimensional consciousness they wish to share. Ben looked up from his work with mild surprise. How do you know that? They communicate exclusively through light patterns most species can't perceive. Nyota's luminescent skin pulsed slightly, her species equivalent of a shrug. Information patterns, architect. Their communication creates distinct energy signatures throughout Nexus. Once identified, such signatures become readable regardless of original format. You can interpret crystal entity communication without specialized equipment. The implications were significant. Even their most advanced technology struggled with direct translation of the complex light-based language. Not with perfect accuracy, she admitted. Conceptual approximation rather than precise translation. But sufficient to recognize when they specifically request interaction with Nexus's creator. Ben saved his work and stood, decision made. Would you like to accompany me? The crystal entities rarely initiate contact with non-crystalline species. Their invitation represents unique opportunity for knowledge exchange. I would be honored, Nyota replied, genuine interest evident in her galaxy eyes. Transcription archives contain limited information on silicon-based philosophical traditions. Direct observation would be invaluable. They departed Concordia together, talking one of the smaller transport vessels to the crystal territories near the Luminal Sea. The journey provided opportunity for continued conversation, their discussion ranging from practical matters of sanctuary management to more abstract concepts of dimensional theory. You've established remarkable equilibrium in just 6 months, Nyota observed as they passed over territories where previously incompatible species now coexisted in carefully designed habitats. 27 distinct species successfully integrated, with minimal territorial conflicts or resource competition. Luck as much as design, Ben admitted. We established basic parameters, but Nexus itself has done most of the adaptive work. The dimension seems to inherently understand biological requirements better than our most sophisticated modeling programs. Nyota's galaxy eyes studied him with that peculiar intensity that suggested she was perceiving more than mere physical presence. You consistently attribute a why to Nexus consciousness rather than complex system behavior. Your colleagues predominantly avoid such characterization in official documentation. The observation, while accurate, carried no criticism, merely factual assessment. Ben considered his response carefully, aware that he had revealed more of his personal perspective to this relative newcomer than to many long-term collaborators. IAL documentation reflects scientific consensus, he said finally. Measurable phenomena, replicable results, peer-reviewed conclusions. My experience with Nexus includes elements that don't easily fit those parameters. Subjective perception, Nyota nodded understanding. The gap between experiential knowledge and communicable data. A familiar challenge to transcriptions. Our neural structures process information holistically, yet must translate to linear formats for exchange with other species. Their conversation paused as they arrived at the crystal territories. The transport settled Gen. TLY on an outcropping overlooking the luminal sea, where dozens of crystal entities had gathered in a formation Ben recognized as their cultural configuration for significant knowledge exchange. The entities acknowledged their arrival with synchronized light patterns, complex prismatic displays that carried specific meaning to those who could interpret them. Ben responded with a simple hand gesture, one they had come to recognize as respectful acknowledgement from biological visitors. They welcome us to the convergence of resonant thought, he explained to Nyota, translating the general concept behind the intricate light patterns. A formal philosophical gathering rarely witnessed by non-crystalline beings. Nyota absorbed this information with characteristic attention, her galaxy eyes racking the light patterns with evident fascination. Their energy signatures create perfect mathematical harmonies. Information density approaching transcription neural compression ratios. The crystal entities shifted configuration, creating a space within their formation clearly intended for the visitors. Ben led the way, Nyota following with appropriate reverence for the cultural significance of the invitation. As they took their positions, the surrounding entities began a synchronized light exchange of extraordinary complexity, ideas and concepts flowing between them in patterns too rapid and intricate for most biological nervous systems to process. Yet to Ben's surprise, Nyota appeared to follow the exchange with remarkable comprehension, her galaxy eyes tracking specific pattern sequences with focused attention. Occasionally, her luminescent skin would pulse in response to particularly complex concepts, as if her body itself served as processing medium for the dense information. You understand them, he realized, observing her reactions. Not completely, she qualified, voice soft with concentration. Perhaps 60% comprehension. Their philosophical framework employs multidimensional conceptual models similar to certain transcription traditions. The underlying mathematical principles translate across formats. Before Ben could respond, the crystal entities erected a specific light sequence toward them, not the general environmental illumination of their internal dialogue, but a focused communication attempt adapted for biological perception. They wish to share their conclusions regarding Nexus's nature, Ben interpreted, recognizing patterns from previous exchanges. They've been studying the dimension since arrival, apparently developing comprehensive theoretical models. The communication that followed taxed the limits of translation, concepts that existed natively as multidimensional light patterns compressed into sequential information accessible to biological minds. Ben found himself relying on his unique connection with Nexus to grasp the full implications, while Nyota's specialized neural structure allowed her similar, if differently structured, comprehension. What emerged was extraordinary. The crystal entities had developed a cohesive theoretical framework describing Nexus not merely as environment or even conscious dimension, but as emergent intelligence operating across multiple planes of existence simultaneously. Their philosophy suggested that the pocket universe existed in quantum superposition, both created reality and self-creating entity, with increasing integration between these states as Nexus evolved. Fascinating perspective, Nyota observed when the primary communication concluded. They perceive Nexus as transitional state between design system and autonomous entity, evolution occurring not just within the dimension but as the dimension. Which aligns with what we've observed, Ben noted, thinking of the biological communication interfaces they'd discovered in Aquos sector. Nexus isn't just adapting to accommodate introduced species, it's developing mechanisms to improve its adaptive capabilities. Meta-evolution. The crystal entities pulsed acknowledgement of their comprehension, then shifted to a new configuration, one Ben had never witnessed in previous interactions. Their formation created a perfect resonance chamber. Light patterns bouncing between precisely positioned entities to form sustained information pathways rather than temporary communications. They're attempting to demonstrate something, Nyota realized, her galaxy eyes widening slightly as she processed the emerging patterns. a practical application of their theoretical model. The demonstration became clear as THE sustained light patterns began interacting directly with Nexus's underlying energy field, not merely reflecting from crystalline surfaces but actually merging with the dimensional fabric itself. Where these interactions occurred, subtle changes manifested in the surrounding environment, micro-adjustments to atmospheric composition, geological stability, even temporal flow. They're communicating directly with Nexus, Ben breathed, watching as the crystal entities essentially bypassed conventional physical interaction to establish information exchange at the quantum level. Using light harmony, CS to access the dimension's foundational patterns. More than communication, Nyota corrected, her perception apparently extending beyond even what Ben could detect. Collaborative creation. Their philosophical framework isn't theoretical, it's functional. They're helping Nexus develop new integration pathways. The demonstration continued for nearly an hour, the crystal entities showing increasing precision in their interactions with Nexus's underlying structure. By the time they concluded, returning to their normal configuration, measurable changes had occurred throughout the surrounding territory, subtle optimizations to environmental conditions that would have taken the technical teams at Concordia weeks to implement through conventional means. They've been doing this since they arrived, Ben realized, understanding dawning as he connected previous observations with this new demonstration. The unusual stability patterns in the crystal territories, the accelerated adaptation rates for introduced species, the entities have been actively collaborating with Nexus itself, helping it develop more efficient environmental control. Symbiotic relationship, Nyota agreed. Their crystalline structure resonates naturally with Nexus's dimensional frequencies. Information exchange occurs bidirectionally without technological mediation. As if confirming their analysis, the crystal entities directed a final communication sequence toward them, an invitation, Ben realized. They were offering to teach these techniques, to share their understanding of direct dimensional interface. An extraordinary opportunity, Nyota said quietly, knowledge exchange beyond conventional parameters, and potentially critical to Nexus's continued development, Ben added, already considering implications for their broader mission. If these techniques could be adapted for other species, the entire sanctuary project might evolve far beyond its original scope. Their return to Concordia carried a sense of profound potential, new understanding that might transform their approach to Nexus's management and development. Yet as they approached the settlement, alert signals from Ben's communication device interrupted their discussion of the crystal entities demonstration. In scheduled portal activation at Genesis Point, came Security Chief Vega's crisp report. Multiple energy signatures detected, Incursine configuration. Ben's expression hardened immediately. Incursine, are you certain? Confirmed through multiple scan protocols, Vega responded. 3 warships maintaining position just beyond dimensional boundary. They're requesting direct communication with Sanctuary leadership. I'm on my way, Ben replied, accelerating their transport toward Concordia's central complex. Full defensive protocols, but no aggressive positioning. Let's see what they want before escalating. Nyota observed the exchange with quiet attention, her galaxy eyes studying Ben's immediate shift to strategic leadership. Incursines have historical conflict with Plumber forces, she noted. Particularly with you personally, if archive records are accurate. Very accurate, Ben confirmed grimly. Which makes their appearance at Nexus highly suspicious. They've opposed the Sanctuary project from the beginning, claimed it violated sovereignty principles and resource rights. Yet the why now approach directly rather than through proxy or subterfuge, Nyota observed. Interesting tactical shift. They reached Concordia's command center within minutes, finding Selene, Magister Patelade, and the security team already assembled around the central display. The holographic projection showed 3 Incursine vessels maintaining stationary position near Genesis Point, their distinctive organic mechanical hybrid design unmistakable. No weapons activated, reported Officer Tarax, monitoring the incoming scans. Standard defense systems operational but passive. They appear to be waiting rather than preparing for engagement. Communication protocols established, added another officer. Channel open whenever you're ready, Architect. Ben studied the tactical display briefly before nodding. Let's hear what they have to say. The main communication screen activated, revealing the interior command center of the lead Inkersine vessel. Commander Raff, a high-ranking military leader Ben had encountered during previous conflicts, stood center frame, his amphibian features set in formal military neutrality rather than the typical aggression of his species. Architect Tennyson, he acknowledged with a precise military nod. The Inkersine Empire requests formal audience regarding matters of mutual concern. The formal diplomatic approach from a traditionally hostile force surprised everyone in the command center, though Ben maintained careful composure. Commander Raff, the Nexus Sanctuary acknowledges your request. State your purpose. Recent developments have read the Empire's position regarding your preservation initiative, Raff replied, military precision in every word. We request permission to transfer endangered biological specimens currently in our protection to sanctuary status. Stunned silence met this declaration. The Inkersine Empire had been among the most vocal opponents of the Nexus project, even threatening military action against early evacuation efforts. Their sudden reversal suggested significant changes in the political landscape. What endangered specimens? Celine asked sharply, scientific skepticism evident in her tone. The Inkersine Empire has never prioritized biological preservation. Commander Raff's amphibian features shifted in what might have been discomfort. Recent military operations in the Andromeda Expansio N zone encountered unexpected resistance. Retaliatory measures may have exceeded optimal parameters. Translation. They started a war they couldn't finish, destroyed habitable planets in the process, and now face galactic backlash for causing another extinction event, Magister Patelade muttered, though quietly enough that the communication system wouldn't transmit his comment. Ben Maintai. Ned diplomatic neutrality despite sharing the sentiment. What species are we discussing, Commander? And what assurance do we have that this isn't an infiltration attempt? Your opposition to Nexus has been well documented. 7 distinct aquatic species from the Nestra system, Raff replied promptly. Approximately 3,000 individuals in stasis preservation. Their biosphere was collateral damage during strategic operations. He straightened, military bearing reasserting itself. As for assurances, the Empire is prepared to submit to full inspection protocols and withdraw completely following transfer. Political realities have shifted, Architect Tennyson. The Empire cannot afford another extinction event attributed to our expansion efforts. Ben exchanged glances with his advisory team, reading the same cautious assessment in their expressions. The Inkersines were clearly acting from political necessity rather than ethical conviction, but their offer presented both opportunity and challenge. Refusing sanctuary to endangered species contradicted Nexus's core mission, yet accepting transfer from a historically hostile force carried obvious security risks. We will need to verify species identification and condition before approving transfer, Ben decided finally. A preliminary inspection team will board your vessels to conduct assessment. Based on their findings, we'll establish appropriate transfer protocols if warranted. Commander Raff nodded acceptance of these terms. Reasonable precautions. We will permit inspection teams access to preservation chambers and relevant documentation. The communication ended with formal acknowledgments, leaving the command center in thoughtful silence as they considered the unexpected development. It's a trap, Security Chief Vega stated flatly, voicing the concern most present shared. The Inkersines have opposed this project since inception. This sudden reversal lacks credibility. Agreed, said Magister Patelade. But if there really are endangered species on those ships, we can't simply turn them away. Our entire mission is preservation of biodiversity. Both perspectives have merit, Nyota observed quietly. Speaking for the first time since the communication began. Her galaxy eyes had tracked the entire exchange with intense focus. Perhaps resolution lies in understanding the Inkersine's true motivation rather than apparent request. Quote, all attention turned to the transcription, who continued her analysis with calm precision. Commander Raff exhibited micro-expressions inconsistent with D's PTION but aligned with political pressure. The Empire has likely suffered diplomatic consequences for recent actions and seeks legitimacy through association with the Sanctuary Initiative. Using endangered species as political leverage, Celine concluded with evident distaste. Attempting to improve their galactic image by appearing to support preservation efforts. A credible assessment, Ben agreed, considering the implications. which suggests the endangered species are likely genuine, but the Empire's motives remain self-serving. Does motivation matter if the outcome serves our mission? Nyota asked, the question philosophical rather than confrontational. Preservation of biodiversity remains achieved regardless of political calculation. The question captured the ethical complexity at the heart of their decision. Nexus had been created to save endangered species without political consideration, a scientific and humanitarian mission rather than a diplomatic one. Yet its why existence inevitably involved political dimensions they couldn't ignore. We proceed with inspection, Ben decided finally. Verify the species' existence and condition. If legitimate endangered populations are present, we accept transfer regardless of the Empire's motives. Our mission transcends political calculation, even when others attempt to exploit it. The decision established clear direction, setting in motion preparations for the inspection team and potential species transfer. Throughout the process, Ben found himself increasingly appreciating Nyota's analytical perspective, her ability to perceive underlying patterns in both communication and motivation provided valuable context for complex diplomatic situations. As the immediate crisis management concluded and the command center returned to normal operations, Ben found a moment to speak with her privately. Thank you for your insights, he said simply. Your perspective helped clarify the actual parameters we're dealing with. Nyota's luminescent skin pulsed slightly, acknowledgement without false modesty. Information analysis is my primary function. Political patterns follow recognizable structures across species and systems. Well, your primary function just helped us navigate a potentially disastrous diplomatic situation, Ben noted with genuine appreciation. The Council would benefit from your continued input as we develop Nexus's interspecies protocols. Knowledge exchange serves mutual benefit, she replied, Galaxy eyes meeting his directly. My purpose in seeking sanctuary included contribution as well as preservation. The transcription archive contains extensive documentation of interspecies diplomacy across 17 galaxies, patterns applicable to current challenges. Their conversation might have continued, but Selene approached with update reports on both the Increasing situation and ongoing habitat preparations for previously scheduled species transfers. Inspection team departs in 20 minutes, she informed them. Preliminary scans confirm stasis fields consistent with biological preservation, though species identification remains unverified. Ben nodded acknowledgement. I want to be on that team. If this is legitimate, it represents a significant shift in regional politics we need to understand firsthand. Already assumed you would insist, Selene replied with the faint smile that occasionally broke through her professional demeanor. Equipment prepared accordingly. She glanced toward Nyota. Scholar Zeph, your expertise in identifying obscure species might prove valuable if you wish to join the inspection. I would be honored to contribute, Nyota responded formally, though genuine interest showed in her galaxy eyes. The transcription archive includes comprehensive biological cataloging of the Nestra system prior to recent conflicts. The inspection mission proceeded with careful efficiency, revealing that Commander Raff had, surprisingly, represented the situation accurately. The Increasing vessels contained approximately 3,000 individuals from 7 distinct aquatic species, all maintained in appropriate stasis preservation. Documenta. Tian confirmed their origin in the Nestra system, which had indeed suffered catastrophic environmental collapse during recent Increasing military operations. More surprising was the condition of the specimens themselves, preserved with uncharacteristic care for a military force not known for biological expertise. When questioned about this unexpected thoroughness, Commander Raff revealed that the reservation efforts had been conducted by scientific personnel assigned to document conquered territories rather than military forces. The Science Division operates with relative autonomy within military structure. He explained with evident discomfort at discussing internal politics with outside observers. They instigated preservation efforts when environmental collapse became inevitable. Against military directive, Ben asked, reading between the lines of the carefully phrased explanation. Raff's amphibian features contorted briefly before military discipline reasserted itself. Let's say that differing perspectives regarding resource management existed between divisions. Recent diplomatic developments have validated the Science Division's foresight. Translation. Scientists saved specimens against military orders. And now that the Empire faced diplomatic consequences for causing another extinction event, those same preservation efforts had become politically valuable. Quote, "The specimens appear viable for transfer to appropriate Nexus habitats," Nyota confirmed after thorough examination. Stasis protocols have maintained cellular integrity with minimal degradation. Val success probability exceeds 97% with proper environmental support. The inspection team's positive assessment initiated formal transfer protocols, with Nexus itself participating in the process through the biological communication interfaces they'd discovered in Aquos sector. The bioluminescent organisms transmitted detailed biological parameters to the Dimension's consciousness, which then optimized specific habitats to receive the Nestra species. Over the following days, as transfer operations continued under careful supervision, Ben found his respect for Nyota Zeph's contributions growing steadily. Her specialized knowledge and unique perceptual abilities repeatedly proved invaluable, whether identifying optimal environmental parameters for the transferred species, or detecting subtle patterns in Nexus's ongoing development that others missed entirely. The integration pathways are evolving, she observed one evening as they reviewed data from the newly established Nestra habitats. The holographic display in Ben's private study showed real-time adaptation occurring as the revived aquatic species explored their new environments. Nexus is creating dynamic feedback loops rather than static parameters. Ben nodded, having noticed similar patterns through his own connection with the Dimension. It's learning that biological requirements aren't fixed, they fluctuate based on activity patterns, reproductive cycles, even emotional states. Sophisticated perception for a system originally designed as managed environment, Nyota noted, her galaxy eyes studying Ben with that peculiar intensity he'd come to recognize as her deepest analytical focus. Your connection with Nexus has similarly evolved beyond initial parameters, has it not? The direct question caught Ben momentarily off guard. While he'd shared more of his personal experience with Nyota than with most colleagues, he had still maintained certain boundaries around the full extent of his relationship with the Dimension. "What makes you say that?" he asked, neither confirming nor denying her assessment. Nyota's luminescent skin pulsed briefly, amusement, perhaps, at his diplomatic deflection. "Information patterns, Architect. Your interaction with Nexus exhibits synchronization frequencies beyond conventional interface parameters. During the Nestra species integration, you transmitted complex biological specifications without technological mediation. Direct neural dimensional communication." Her observation was accurate, if understated. Ben's connection with Nexus had indeed evolved far beyond initial parameters, reaching a point where he could communicate directly with the Dimension's consciousness without technological interface, a development he had shared with no one, not even Selene. "The Omnitrix creates unique neural pathways," he explained, offering a partial truth. "Years of alien transformations have altered my neurological structure in ways not fully documented." A contributory factor, certainly, Nyota acknowledged, though insufficient to explain the specific resonance patterns of observed. Your connection appears bilateral, not merely transmission but genuine exchange. Similar to what the crystal entities demonstrated, but more deeply integrated. The accuracy of her assessment made further deflection seem pointless. "You're right," Ben admitted finally. "My relationship with Nexus has evolved beyond what was originally anticipated. The Dimension doesn't just respond to my input, it communicates, collaborates. Sometimes I perceive its intentions before they manifest physically." Quote, Nyota absorbed this confirmation without surprise. "A logical development given your role in its creation. You established its foundational parameters, your neural patterns are essentially woven into its basic structure. Which raises questions the Council isn't prepared to address," Ben noted with a hint of weariness. "Questions about what Nexus is becoming. What my ongoing connection means for its development. For now, it's simpler to maintain functional oversight without delving into the philosophical implications." Practical governance approach, Nyota acknowledged. Though eventually, the Dimension's continued evolution will necessitate broader understanding of your unique relationship. Their conversation might have continued further into these complex territories, but an alert from the environmental monitoring system interrupted with notification of unusual activity in the Taros sector, specifically, in the volcanic plains where the Recently introduced Terosian refugees had established their primary community. Seismic anomalies detected. Ben read from the display, concern immediately replacing philosophical contemplation. Agma flow patterns deviating from established parameters. Together they moved to the larger monitoring station in his study, activating the detailed environmental scan systems. The holographic display expanded to show a three-dimensional representation of the affected region, where indeed the underlying geological stability appeared compromised. Pattern suggests intentional modification rather than natural fluctuation, Nyota observed, her galaxy eyes tracking specific data points within the complex display. Energy signatures indicate organized activity rather than random instability. N's expression shifted from concern to focused concentration as he extended his awareness through his connection with Nexus, seeking direct perception of the anomalous activity. What he encountered confirmed Nyota's assessment. The geological changes weren't random failures but deliberate modifications being implemented by the Terosians themselves. They're redesigning their habitat, he realized. Understanding flowing through his dimensional connection. Adapting the volcanic systems to create specific mineral compositions they require for their reproductive cycle. Without consulting Cordia's environmental management protocols, Nyota noted, though her tone suggested observation rather than criticism. Interesting decision given the potential systemic impact. Ben studied the Ong modifications with growing fascination rather than alarm. The Terosians, silicon-based entities that existed comfortably within molten rock environments, were demonstrating remarkable understanding of Nexus's underlying systems. Manipulating geological processes with precision that rivaled their own technical teams. They're not damaging anything, he observed after thorough analysis. In fact, they're improving overall stability while creating the specialized conditions they need. It's just unexpected initiative. Perhaps not entirely unexpected, Nyota suggested thoughtfully. Each species we introduce brings not only biological requirements but cultural practices, technological knowledge, evolutionary adaptations. Collective intelligence now residing within Nexus exceeds 176 billion years of combined evolutionary development across 34 distinct species. Emergent innovation seems inevitable rather than surprising. The perspective resonated with Ben's own evolving understanding of what Nexus was becoming. Not simply a controlled environment preserving endangered species, but a collaborative ecosystem where multiple intelligences contribute to ongoing development and adaptation. We created something far more complex than we initially imagined, he said quietly, watching as the Terosians continued their sophisticated geological engineering. Nexus isn't just a sanctuary, it's becoming an evolutionary laboratory, a place where endangered species don't just survive but potentially thrive in new ways. The ultimate preservation, Nyota agreed. Galaxy eyes reflecting the holographic display of vibrant activity. Not static maintenance of what was, but dynamic evolution of what might be. As they continued monitoring the Terosians' activities, eventually confirming that the modifications posed no threat to overall environmental stability, Ben found himself reflecting on how profoundly Nexus had evolved in just 6 months, and how his own relationship with his creation had similarly transformed. What had begun as a controlled scientific project had become something far more complex and nuanced, a living system with its own developmental trajectory. Responding not just to programmed parameters but to the collective needs and contributions of its increasingly diverse inhabitants. And somewhere in that evolution, Ben's role had shifted as well. No longer simply creator or administrator, he had become something more akin to participant, a node in the complex network of interactions that constituted Nexus's developing consciousness. The implications stretched beyond anything he had initially imagined when proposing the Sanctuary project. Nyota's unique perspective had helped him recognize patterns he might otherwise have missed or misinterpreted. Her transcription knowledge providing valuable context for Nexus's unprecedented development. As they concluded their monitoring session, confirming that the Terosians' modifications had stabilized into sustainable new patterns, Ben found himself appreciating not just Nyota's analytical contributions but her philosophical approach, her ability to perceive emerging possibilities rather than merely cataloging existing conditions. "Thank you," he said simply as they prepared to return to their respective duties. "Your perspective has been invaluable." Nyota's Galaxy eyes met his with that distinctive intensity that somehow conveyed both analytical precision and genuine connection. Knowledge exchange benefits both participants. My understanding expands through our interactions as well. The statement, delivered with characteristic transcription formality, nonetheless carried warmth beneath its precise phrasing. 6 months ago, Ben might have focused solely on the functional value of such an exchange. Now, having watched Nexus evolve from simple environment to complex living system, he recognized something more significant in this developing relate. Ionship, the same pattern of mutual growth and adaptation that characterized the Dimension's most successful integrations. Nexus continued to evolve, and through it, so did they all. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, Infiltration. 370 kilometers from Concordia's central spire, in a transition zone where the controlled climate of Taros sector gave way to the methane fields of Ventus. A shadow detached itself from absolute stillness. The movement was so subtle that not even the hypersensitive atmospheric sensors registered the displacement. One moment, empty space, the next, a figure in form-fitting armor, the precise hue of ambient darkness. 8 months of operation, and Nexus had its first uninvited visitor. The intruder crouched at the edge of a basalt outcropping, helmet visor analyzing the patrol patterns of automated security drones with cold efficiency. Beneath the reflective faceplate, eyes the color of tarnished silver tracked multiple data points simultaneously, calculating optimal paths through layered defense systems. Kala Vex hadn't earned her reputation as the galaxy's most elusive infiltration specialist by underestimating security parameters, no matter how remote the target. She'd spent 3 weeks studying Nexus from outside, intercepting data transmissions, analyzing patrol patterns, and mapping energy signatures. Now, finally inside, she allowed herself exactly 6 seconds of professional satisfaction before continuing her mission. Perimeter breach undetected, she sub-vocalized, the words transmitted through quantum-encrypted channels to a receiver light years distant. Initial assessment. Security protocols sophisticated but predictable. Proceeding to secondary objective. No response came through the channel. Her employer Pref aired minimal communication during active operations, but acknowledgement wasn't necessary. Kala worked alone, always. Independence wasn't just professional preference, it was survival. She consulted he spatial mapping projected inside her visor. The artifact her employer sought was supposedly housed in the high-security vault beneath Concordia's central research facility. 290s. Separate security measures stood between her current position and that objective. A lesser infiltrator would have considered the challenge impossible. Kala Vex considered it Tuesday. With fluid precision, she activated the phase shift module integrated into her armor. The specialized Galvan technology temporarily altered her molecular cohesion, allowing her to pass through the sensor grid as insubstantial as vapor. The process consumed enormous power, 15 seconds maximum duration, followed by mandatory recalibration period, but used correctly, those seconds could bypass defenses that would take hours to circumvent conventionally. Phase shifting carried risks beyond power consumption. The molecular destabilization produced a distinct energy signature detectable by sophisticated scanning systems. Kala's intelligence gathering suggested Nexus employed precisely such technology, but with gaps in coverage she could exploit with proper timing. Slipping through the atmospheric boundary between sectors, she allowed herself a moment to admire the unprecedented environmental engineering on display. The transition between Taros and Ventus had been crafted with remarkable precision, gradually shifting atmospheric composition, controlled pressure gradients, specialized adaptive organisms creating biological transition buffers. Even to her pragmatic assessment, the achievement was undeniably impressive. Professional admiration didn't distract from the mission, however. Reactivating her stealth systems, Kala continued toward Concordia, using natural features as cover while avoiding patrol routes. Her approach was methodical, patient, leaving minimal evidence of passage. The methane fields of Ventus provided both challenge and opportunity. The gaseous environment reduced visibility, an advantage for stealth operations, but required specialized filtration systems that limited operation time. Kala's armor compensated automatically, reconfiguring external membranes to process the methane-rich atmosphere. But the adaptations reduced overall system efficiency by 17%. Acceptable limitation, given the alternative. As she navigated the increasingly dense gas formations, Kala's sensors detected unusual energy patterns emanating from within the methane clouds themselves. Pausing behind a crystalline formation, she directed enhanced scanning toward the anomalous readings. What she discovered added unexpected complexity to her assessment. The methane clouds weren't merely environmental features, they contained structured energy patterns suggesting organized information exchange. Not technology exactly, at least not in conventional terms, but something equally sophisticated. Living information networks, surveillance capability unaccounted for in preliminary intelligence, she noted in her mission log. Possible sentient monitoring throughout atmospheric composition. Adjusting approach accordingly, the discovery necessitated more cautious progress. Kala modified her route to avoid the densest concentration of these living information networks, accepting additional travel time in exchange for reduced detection probability. The path took her our region of crystalline formations that grew increasingly complex as she approached the boundary with Aquos sector. 17 minutes into her infiltration, the first genuine challenge presented itself. A security checkpoint controlled the transition between sectors, not the standard automated scanners she'd anticipated, but a manned station with both technological and biological monitoring systems. Kala settled into absolute stillness behind a crystal outcropping, studying the checkpoint with professional detachment. 2 plumber security officers, 1 human, 1 Petrosapian, monitored a sophisticated scanning array while engaging in casual conversation. More concerning was the transparent containment unit beside their station, housing what appeared to be a colony of the bioluminescent organisms she'd detected throughout Ventus sector. Preliminary intelligence had mentioned nothing about biological security measures integrated with technological systems. The development suggested more sophisticated defense parameters than her employer had indicated. Interesting. She considered options methodically. Direct confrontation. Unacceptable risk of alerting broader security networks. Circumvention. Possible but requiring significant detour through unstable environmental boundaries. Technology-based countermeasures. Likely ineffective against biological monitoring components. The solution presented itself as she observed the checkpoint's operational patterns. Every 12 minutes, the scanning systems initiated a self-diagnostic routine lasting approximately 27 seconds. During this interval, the biological component showed distinct changes in luminescence patterns, suggesting temporary reduction in monitoring sensitivity while the systems recalibrated their integration parameters. A 27-second window. Tight, but workable. Kala synced her armor's chronometer to the diagnostic cycle, preparing for precision movement. When the next diagnostic sequence initiated, she activated her phase shift module and crossed the open ground in absolute silence, passing directly through the checkpoint barrier during the exact moment of maximum system vulnerability. Successful penetration brought her to the edges of Aquos sector, where environmental conditions shifted dramatically. Humid air heavy with unfamiliar organic compounds replaced the methane-rich atmosphere of Ventus. Bioluminescent vegetation cast prismatic light across terrain that transitioned from crystalline structures to something resembling coastal marshland. Concordia's central spire now loomed visible in the distance, its distinctive architecture reflecting the blend of Earth technology and alien influence that characterized Nexus's developing culture. Reaching it would require traversing increasingly populated territory, a challenge of different magnitude than the environmental hazards she'd navigated thus far. Kala paused to recalibrate both equipment and strategy. Her armor's adaptive camouflage shifted, matching the new environment's visual spectrum with perfect precision. Internal systems adjusted to compensate for increased humidity and atmospheric composition changes. The phase shift module began its recharge cycle, power cells converting ambient energy with quiet efficiency. Phase 2 infiltration commencing, she sub-vocalized to the mission log. Population density increasing. Transitioning to social camouflage protocols. Unlike most infiltration specialists, Kala Vex considered populated areas advantageous terrain. People saw what they expected to see, a principle that had allowed her to penetrate some of the most secure facilities in the galaxy by simply appearing to belong. Nexus presented unique challenges in this regard, given its diverse species' composition and heightened security awareness, but the fundamental psychology remained exploitable. From a concealed compartment in her armor, she extracted a small device resembling a communicatio N badge typical of plumber field technicians. The device contained sophisticated identity forgery programming capable of generating credentials that would withstand cursory verification. For deeper penetration, she carried 3 additional identity packages with progressively more robust authentication protocols. Adjusting her armor to resemble standard plumber environmental field gear, Kala Emmer G'd from cover and proceeded with confident purpose toward the nearest research outpost, a small facility located at the transition boundary between Aquos and the central neutral zone surrounding Concordia. Her movement patterns shifted subtly, adopting the methodical efficiency of a technician conducting routine maintenance rather than the predatory grace of an infiltrator. The research outpost W, as minimally staffed, 2 scientists absorbed in monitoring equipment, a single security officer stationed near the entrance. Kala approached directly, badge prominently displayed, posture conveying professional boredom rather than threat. Atmospheric calibration maintenance, she stated as the security officer looked up, her voice modulated to the precise tone of someone performing routine duties. Sector transition monitoring showing 16% deviation from baseline. Probably just sensor drift, but protocol requires physical verification. The officer, a Kinesolaran hybrid whose feet, yours suggested partial human ancestry, glanced at her credentials without particular interest. Wasn't notified of scheduled maintenance. Kala produced a datapad displaying appropriate work orders, complete with authorization codes harvested from intercepted communications. Last-minute addition. The monitoring station in Taros picked up the deviation during routine scanning. Better to check it now than wait for actual environmental instability. The explanation contained sufficient technical accuracy to satisfy a security officer whose primary concern was biological threats rather than identity verification. With minimal further questioning, Kala gained access to the outpost systems, ostensibly to verify atmospheric readings, actually to extract valuable intelligence about Concordia's internal security protocols. 10 minutes of focused work yielded comprehensive data on patrol schedules, sensor configurations, and communication encryption, all transmitted in compressed bursts to her distant employer while appearing to conduct legitimate maintenance. The infiltration was proceeding with optimal efficiency. Until something changed. The shift was subtle, not in the facility's security posture or the behavior of its personnel, but in Nexus itself. The dimension's underlying energy patterns altered fractionally, a change imperceptible to standard instruments but visible to Kala's specialized scanning technology. Something about the pocket universe was responding to her presence in ways her intelligence briefing hadn't predicted. Anomalous environmental response detected, she noted in her mission log, voice betraying no concern despite the unexpected development. Possible sentient dimensional monitoring, accelerating timetable, completing her supposed maintenance with professional efficiency. Kala departed the research outpost toward Concordia's central complex. The direct route would take her through increasingly populated areas, but her updated intelligence suggested a maintenance access pathway with minimal security coverage, a vulnerability created by recent construction expanding the settlement's research facilities. She had covered approximately half the distance to this access point when her tactical assessment changed dramatically. Multiple security alerts activated simultaneously throughout the region, communication channels suddenly filling with encrypted transmissions. Not coincidence. Coordinated response to detected threat. Her infiltration had been compromised. Kala shifted immediately to contingency protocols, abandoning the direct approach in favor of evasive movement. Her armor reconfigured to maximum stealth configuration, sensor profile reducing to near zero as she sought cover among the dense vegetation bordering the settlement perimeter. Security forces deployed with unexpected efficiency, not the standard response patterns she'd observed during surveillance, but something more sophisticated. Drone formations establish interlocking sensor grids while ground teams moved with tactical precision that suggested veteran combat experience rather than routine security training. More concerning was the pattern of their deployment, not a standard search expanding from a detection point, but strategic positioning anticipating her most likely movement paths. Someone wasn't just responding to her presence, they were predicting her actions with uncomfortable accuracy. Compromised, she confirmed through the secure channel, the first direct communication since beginning the operation. Implementing Extraction Protocol Sigma-9. For the first time, her employer responded. Negative. Mission parameters unchanged. Complete primary objective regardless of exposure. The order confirmed Kala's suspicion that this operation involved stakes beyond standard intelligence gathering. Whatever artifact her employer sought must carry extraordinary value to justify continuing despite compromised status. Acknowledged, she replied without emotion. Though privately she adjusted her threat assessment upward. Employers who maintained mission parameters after compromise typically placed objective value above operative. Survival. Useful information for negotiating final payment. Assuming survival. New strategy required. Direct approach to Concordia now impossible given activated security protocols. Alternate vector. Necessary. Perhaps utilizing the environmental systems themselves as cover. Intelligence suggested extensive maintenance tunnels connected the environmental control stations regulating Nexus's distinct habitats. Accessing these systems would require. Her tactical analysis interrupted as instinct triggered evasive movement a fraction of a second before energy discharge struck her previous position. The blast, precision-targeted stun pulse rather than lethal force, originated from approximately 60 meters northwest, the shooter concealed among dense foliage. Kala responded with practiced efficiency, deploying countermeasures while establishing visual on her attacker. Smoke spheres created momentary visual obstruction while she activated thermal dampening fields to counteract scanning technology. Through shifting smoke, she caught glimpse of her pursuer, tall, athletic build, moving with controlled precision that spoke of extensive combat experience. The distinctive emblem on his chest identified him immediately. Ben Tennyson, architect of Nexus himself. This development altered mission parameters significantly. Tennyson's combat capabilities were legendary. Multiple eyewitness AQ. NTS documented his effectiveness across thousands of engagements. More concerning was the Omnitrix, which essentially made him multiple opponents simultaneously, each with distinct capabilities requiring different countermeasures. Target identification confirmed. Tennyson, she reported through secure channel. Extraction difficulty increased by approximately 300%. Irrelevant, came the immediate response. Primary objective unchanged. Of course, Kala activated additional countermeasures while calculating escape vectors. The vegetation provided temporary concealment, BU. Tennyson's transformation capabilities would quickly neutralize that advantage. Better to establish distance, force pursuit through terrain offering tactical opportunities. She moved with practiced silence deeper into the dense forest surrounding Concordia's perimeter, leaving minimal evidence of passage while deploying passive sensor countermeasures to obscure her trail. The environment itself presented both challenge and opportunity, unfamiliar terrain but with complexity that could be exploited against pursuers. Through specialized audio enhancement, she detected Tennyson's approach, controlled movement. Maintaining distance while analyzing her escape route. Not rushing the pursuit. Interesting tactical choice suggesting confidence rather than urgency. I know you're there, his Voic. Carried clearly through the vegetation. And I'm pretty sure you know I know. So we could save time and skip to the part where we talk about why you're here. The direct communication approach surprised her. Most security forces maintained tactical silence during pursuit. The invitation to dialogue suggested either overconfidence or legitimate interest in her objectives rather than simply her capture. Kala remained silent, using the distraction of his speech to deploy a specialized reconnaissance drone, thumbnail-sized, virtually undetectable to standard security systems. The drone ascended above the canopy, providing tactical overview of her surroundings and confirming her suspicions. Security forces were establishing perimeter containment while leaving direct pursuit to Tennyson alone. Confidence indeed, or perhaps something else, testing her capabilities rather than simply neutralizing a threat. The thought aligned with certain intelligence suggesting Tennyson's approach to secure ITY often involved recruitment rather than elimination. Professional courtesy, Tennyson continued, his movement patterns indicating he was circling to her right flank. One specialist to another. Why? Our entrance was impressive. Bypassing the boundary sensors was particularly elegant work. Most wouldn't have detected the diagnostic cycle vulnerability. The complement contained valuable intelligence. CE. Confirmation that her initial infiltration had been detected despite precautions. The question was when. The timing would indicate which systems had identified her presence and which she had successfully defeated. Kala maintained silence, using his continued speech to mask her movement as she repositioned. The reconnaissance drone showed Tennyson approximately 20 meters from her position, scanning systematically while continuing casual conversation. Silent type. Fair enough, he continued, now deliberately projecting his voice to cover potential movement sounds, evidence of tactical sophistication beyond standard security protocols. Let's establish what we both know. You're here for something specific, not general intelligence gathering. Your movement pattern indicates Concordia's research sector as target, not the habitat zones or administrative complex. That narrows possibilities considerably. His assessment was uncomfortably accurate, suggesting either predictive analysis based on minimal data points or prior intelligence about her mission objectives. Neither possibility improved her tactical position. Time to change the dynamic. Remaining in defensive posture allowed him to control engagement parameters. Better to force response, create opening for counteraction. Kala deployed specialized countermeasures, sound projection spheres that created duplicate movement. Noises in multiple locations simultaneously, combined with thermal decoys mimicking body heat signatures. The combination would confuse standard tracking methods long enough to reposition Advantage Owsley. The response wasn't what she expected. Rather than investigating the decoys or hesitating in confusion, Tennyson moved directly toward her actual position with unerring accuracy. Not guesswork. He somehow detected her precise location despite state-of-the-art concealment technology. That's really nice tech, he commented as he approached, sounding genuinely impressed rather than triumphant. Galvan-based but with custom modifications. The thermal displacement field is particularly effective, most scanners would completely miss it. The statement confirmed her suspicion that standard detection methods weren't in play. Something else allowed him to track her with precision that defied conventional countermeasures. Time for direct approach. Kala activated her armor's combat enhancement systems. Strength and reaction time amplifiers engaging as she prepared for close-quarters engagement. If he could track her regardless of stealth measures, better to control the confrontation parameters directly. She launched from concealment with explosive speed, covering the distance between them in a fraction of a second. Her attack sequence targeted nerve clusters and joint vulnerabilities with precision born from thousands of combat encounters across dozens of species. Tennyson reacted with unexpected speed for unaugmented human physiology, shifting stance to deflect rather than block her initial strike. The movement confirmed advanced combat training, conservation of energy rather than direct force opposition. Interesting. Nice form, he commented, countering her secondary attack with similar efficiency. Petrosaur combat discipline with Tetraman power application. Effective combination. The casual analysis during active combat was either psychological tactic or genuine professional assessment. Either way, it suggested confidence levels that worried her. No opponent should be this comfortable during high-speed combat engagement. Kala increased attack tempo, transition. Between 7 distinct combat disciplines in rapid sequence, a technique designed to prevent pattern recognition and adaptation. Each style targeted different vulnerabilities while protecting again. Saint counterattack through continuous position adjustment. Tennyson defended with remarkable effectiveness, his movement suggesting familiarity with each discipline she employed. Not perfect counters. He landed several strikes that would incapacitate standard opponents, but sufficient to prevent decisive advantage. Okay, now I'm impressed, he acknowledged after narrowly avoiding a strike sequence that should have been unpredictable. That last combination was apoplexy in origin with something else I don't recognize. Custom development. His continued conversation during intense combat met her suspicion that he was assessing rather than merely defending. The realization shifted her tactical approach. If he was evaluating her capabilities, the engagement represented opportunity as well as threat. Nigelian shadow discipline with apoplexy and power application, she responded finally, voice modulator giving her words metallic resonance. More effective than either individually. Agreed, he replied, seeming genuinely pleased she'd engaged in the exchange. I've always found hybrid techniques more adaptable than pure forms. Though I'm more familiar with Ravana Kai combined with Earth disciplines myself. The conversation continued through increasingly complex combat exchanges, both participants maintaining professional respect despite the intensity of their engagement. Kala found herself in the unusual position of genuinely enjoying a confrontation. Tennyson's combat proficiency and analytical approach matched her own methodology in ways few opponents ever had. AF. Tear nearly 3 minutes of continuous exchange, an eternity in close quarters combat, they separated by mutual, unspoken agreement. Neither had gained decisive advantage, though both had landed suffisi. End strikes to evaluate the other's capabilities. We could continue this for hours, Tennyson observed, breathing controlled despite the exertion. And honestly, it would be educationally valuable for both of us. But perhaps we could skip to the part where you explain your interest in Nexus. Professional obligation prevents disclosure of operational parameters, Kala replied formally, though. Without the hostility such refusal would typically carry. Client confidentiality is absolute. Respectable position, he acknowledged with what appeared to be genuine approval. Though it creates certain practical challenges regarding our current situation. The tactical stalemate presented interesting decision parameters. Continuing combat served no practical purpose given their demonstrated equality in conventional engagement. Extraction without completing primary objectives would constitute mission failure. Capture was unacceptable both professionally and personally. Before she could formulate response, Tennyson made unexpected tactical shift. What if I showed you what you came to see? The proposal caught her completely off guard, a rare achievement against her predictive analysis capabilities. Clarify parameters. You're here for specific intelligence regarding Nexus's core systems, most likely the dimensional stability matrix or the adaptive environmental controls. Information valuable to somebody trying to understand how we created a stable pocket universe. His assessment was disconcertingly accurate. I'm proposing controlled disclosure, showing you enough to satisfy your employer's curiosity without compromising Nexus's security. The offer represented either sophisticated trap or legitimate negotiation attempt. Kala's mission parameters didn't specifically prohibit information acquisition through direct disclosure rather than covert extraction. Motivation for voluntary disclosure, she inquired, professional skepticism evident despite genuine curiosity. Tennyson smiled, the expression surprisingly genuine given their adversarial positions. Professional respect, primarily. You've demonstrated exceptional skill sets. I'd rather satisfy your employer's curiosity in controlled fashion than continue this excellent but ultimately unproductive engagement. Alternative being capture attempt, she noted pragmatically. Eventually successful capture attempt, he corrected without arrogance. Simply stating tactical assessment, though not without significant effort on my part. Hence the more efficient proposal. Kala considered options methodically. The offer potentially satisfied mission objectives while avoiding increasingly problematic tactical situation. Her employer had specified information acquisition by any means necessary, without express licit requirement for covert methodology. Acceptable proposal, she decided finally. With operational security guarantees. Of course, safe passage following information exchange, provided the information isn't used to harm Nexus or its inhabitants. His immediate acceptance suggested the terms had been formulated before engagement, further evidence of sophisticated tactical planning. Their arrangement established, Tennyson led her toward Concordia's research sector through maintenance access ways that bypassed standard security checkpoints. The route demonstrated intimate knowledge of the settlement's structure, not surprising given his position as architect, but professionally impressive nonetheless. I'm curious about your employer, he commented as they navigated the access tunnels. Not asking for identification, professional courtesy and all that, but general motivations would be helpful context for appropriate disclosure levels. Kala considered the request against operational security protocols. Limited disclosure might facilitate more valuable information exchange while maintaining client confidentiality. Assessment operation. Determining Nexus's value as potential acquisition target. Tennyson processed this with thoughtful expression rather than alarm. Interesting. Most potential hostiles view Nexus as threat rather than asset. Your employer sees value worth preserving rather than destroying. That's actually refreshing, in a concerning sort of way. Resource assessment only, Kala clarified. Operational parameters exclude sabotage or permanent compromise. Good to know. He replied with that same genuine smile that seemed incongruous given their circumstances. Makes my job easier. And yours, ultimately. They reached a secured laboratory area deep within Concordia's research sector. Tennyson placed his hand on the access panel, initiating identification protocols that went far beyond standard security measures, DNA verification, brainwave pattern matching, and something that appeared to interact directly with the dimensional fabric itself. The laboratory beyond contained technology unlike anything Kala had encountered in extensive infiltration experience. Conventional equipment intermingled with devices that seemed to phase between physical and energy states without clear delineation. Most striking was the central chamber, a transparent T-enclosure where reality itself appeared distorted, physical laws bending in patterns that defied standard perception. The dimensional interface matrix, Tennyson explained, gesturing toward the central chamber, where we monitor and occasionally adjust Nexus's fundamental parameters. What you're seeing is direct visualization of dimensional fabric, the boundary between conventional space-time and the pocket universe we created. Kala studied the technology with professional appreciation, her specialized sensors recording detailed specifications while maintaining appropriate distance from sensitive equipment. The information alone would satisfy her employer's primary objectives, confirming that Nexus operated according to controllable parameters rather than random dimensional phenomena. Remarkable achievement, she acknowledged, professional detachment temporarily yielding to genuine admiration. Stable dimensional engineering beyond theoretical limitations. That's the interesting part, Tennyson replied, activating a holographic display showing Nexus's developmental timeline. We established initial parameters, but Nexus quickly evolved beyond our original specifications. The dimension itself adapted, self-optimized, essentially becoming partner in its own creation rather than passive environment. The information aligned with certain anomalies she detected during infiltration, particularly the unusual energy patterns suggesting dimensional awareness rather than mere physical properties. Such capabilities represented value far beyond her employer's initial assessment parameters. Sentient dimensional matrix, she noted, the implications significant for her mission assessment. Self-aware rather than programmed. We prefer emergent consciousness as terminology, Tennyson corrected with surprising gentleness. Sentience carries philosophical and ethical implications we're still exploring. But yes, Nexus demonstrates characteristics beyond conventional environmental systems, problem solving, adaptation, even forms of communication through specialized interfaces. He activated additional displays showing the dimension's evolutionary timeline, initial creation, environmental development, species integration, communication interfaces. The comprehensive disclosure suggested confidence rather than security concern. He was deliberately providing in format ion that would normally require extensive infiltration to acquire. Sufficient for assessment parameters, Kala acknowledged after absorbing the technical details. Extraction protocol can proceed as negotiated. Tennyson deactivated the displays with casual gesture that nonetheless suggested precise control of the sophisticated systems. Before we conclude our arrangement, I'm curious about your professional assessment. Nexus represents significant investment of resources and expertise. From infiltration specialist perspective, is it adequately secured? The question surprised her. Security. Administrators rarely sought genuine feedback from those who penetrated their defenses. Professional pride suggested comprehensive response despite adversarial relationship. Sophisticated multi-layered defense integration. She analyzed formally. Conventional security measures effectively implemented. Biological monitoring components particularly innovative. Primary vulnerability identified in diagnostic cycle timing. Predictable intervals creating exploitable patterns. Secondary vulnerability in transition zone monitoring protocols. Sensor overlap insufficient for comprehensive coverage. Tennyson nodded thoughtfully, apparently genuinely considering her assessment rather than simply acknowledging it. Constructive feedback. We'll adjust those parameters immediately. He hesitated briefly before continuing. Actually, I have a proposition beyond our current arrangement. Kala maintained neutral posture while activating enhanced analytical systems to evaluate potential deception indicators. Specify parameters. Employment, he stated directly. Nexus Security Division requires specialists with precisely your skill set. Someone who understands infiltration methodology from PR. Practical experience rather than theoretical training. Compensation would significantly exceed standard bounty hunting or corporate espionage rates. The proposal was so unexpected that Kala's typical, "Why?" flawless composure momentarily faltered. Clarification required. "You're offering employment to an operative who infiltrated your security perimeter." "I'm offering employment to the most skilled infiltration specialist I've encountered in years," he corrected. "Someone who identified vulnerabilities our entire security division missed, navigated complex environmental hazards without specialized training, and demonstrated combat proficiency matching my own capabilities. Those skills are more valuable working for Nexus than potentially against it." Professional pragmatism competed with ingrained independence as Kala evaluated the proposal. Employment contradicted her established operational methodology. She worked contract basis exclusively, maintaining absolute independence from permanent allegiance. Yet the offer presented intriguing possibilities beyond financial consideration. "Current contract obligations prevent immediate consideration," she replied finally. "Operational parameters require mission completion and formal disengagement before new contractual relationships." "Understood," Tennyson acknowledged without apparent disappointment. "The offer remains open following conclusion of your current obligations. Consider it professional courtesy, one specialist recognizing another's exceptional capabilities." Their negotiation concluded with formal agreement regarding her extraction, controlled departure through specified route with security forces instructed to permit passage without interference. The arrangement demonstrated Tennyson's authority within Nexus's command structure and his confidence that she would maintain the terms of their agreement. As they prepared to implement extraction protocols, Kala found herself unexpectedly reluctant to conclude their interaction. Professional encounters rarely involved genuine respect between opposing specialists. Most security administrators responded to infiltration with indignation rather than appreciation of technical proficiency. Hypothetically, she began, unusual uncertainty coloring her typically decisive communication style. If employment consideration became operationally viable following current contract completion, what specific parameters would position entail? Tennyson seemed to recognize the significance of her inquiry despite its careful phrasing. Security systems evaluation primarily, identifying vulnerabilities before they can be exploited, training specialized response teams in counter-infiltration methodology, establishing more sophisticated defense parameters based on practical field experience rather than theoretical models. The description aligned with her specialized capabilities while offering application beyond standard mercenary operations. Professional development rather than mere employment. Secondary consideration. Nexus itself, he continued, apparently sensing her interest despite neutral expression. "What we've created here goes beyond sanctuary or research station. It's evolving into something unprecedented, a place where endangered species don't just survive but potentially thrive in new ways. Contributing to that evolution offers unique professional opportunities beyond conventional security operations." His perception was uncomfortably accurate, identifying considerations she hadn't consciously acknowledged even to herself. Recent contracts had provided technical challenges but limited substantive impact. The possibility of contributing to something genuinely unprecedented held appeal beyond financial compensation. "Proposal will receive appropriate consideration following contract completion," she stated formally, though something in her tone suggested greater interest than professional courtesy required. Their farewell maintained appropriate professional distance. No dramatic gestures or unnecessary conversation, simply mutual acknowledgement between specialists who had measured each other's capabilities and found them worthy of respect. Tennyson provided extraction coordinates and security clearance codes as agreed, then stepped back to allow her unimpeded departure. Kala Vex exited Nexus through the specified extraction route, her mission technically successful despite significant deviation from original parameters. The information acquired would satisfy her employer's assessment requirements while revealing nothing that might compromise the dimension's fundamental security. Yet as dimensional transition returned her to conventional space, unusual contemplation occupied her typically focused thoughts. The encounter with Tennyson and Nexus itself presented considerations beyond standard operational assessment, possibilities that challenged her established independence with unexpected appeal. Professional route in would dictate immediate employer contact, mission debriefing, and preparation for subsequent contracts. Instead, she found herself reviewing Tennyson's employment proposal with uncharacteristic thoroughness, analyzing potential applications of her specialized capabilities within Nexus's developing security framework. Something about the Pocket universe and its architect had disrupted her care. Fully maintained professional detachment, not emotional connection. Such vulnerabilities had been methodically excised from her operational methodology years ago, but intellectual engagement with genuinely novel circumstances. Perhaps, she acknowledged with reluctant introspection, it was time to consider operational parameters beyond mere contract fulfillment. Ben Tennyson watched the extra action portal close behind the departing infiltration specialist, thoughtful consideration replacing the casual confidence he'd maintained throughout their encounter. The interaction had confirmed Sev Errol's suspicions while raising new questions about potential threats to Nexus's security. "You let her go," came Celine's voice from behind him, her tone suggesting professional disagreement rather than accusation. "After she penetrated our security perimeter and accessed restricted research data. I let her go with exactly the information I wanted her employer to have," Ben corrected, turning to face his longtime colleague. "Nothing that compromises our fundamental security, but enough to satisfy curiosity without motivating more aggressive approaches." Celine's expression remained skeptical. "And you believe she'll honor that arrangement?" Professional infiltrators aren't typically known for their commitment to negotiated agreements. "This one will," Ben replied with quiet certainty. "She operates according to strict professional parameters. Contract fulfillment is fundamental to her operational methodology." "You seem remarkably confident in your assessment of someone you encountered for the first time today," Celine noted, scientific precision focusing on the apparent logical inconsistency. "Unless there's something you haven't shared regarding prior knowledge of this operative." Ben smiled slightly at her perceptiveness. "Intelligence reports. Certain infiltration patterns matched documented methodologies from previous security breaches across multiple high-security installations. The technical signature is distinctive: precision timing, minimal resource utilization, elegant problem-solving rather than brute force approaches." "You recognized her methods from intelligence briefings," Celine summarized. "Professional respect evident despite continued concern. And deliberately engaged alone rather than with security teams because conventional security response would have escalated the situation unnecessarily," Ben explained, leading the way back toward Concordia's central complex. "She's never caused casualties during previous operations, Atesh strictly information acquisition parameters without violence unless directly threatened. Better to engage specialist to specialist than force defensive reactions." Celine processed this rationale with characteristic thoroughness as they walked. "And the employment offer, was that genuine or merely extraction negotiation tactic?" "Completely genuine," Ben confirmed without hesitation. "Nexus needs precisely her skill set. Someone who understands infiltration from practical experience rather than theoretical training. Someone who can identify vulnerabilities before they become exploitable weaknesses. Someone who just demonstrated ability to bypass our most sophisticated security measures," Celine observed dryly. "Practical hiring strategy or keeping potential threats where you can monitor them." Ben's smile acknowledged the accuracy of her assessment. "Both, obviously. Her capabilities make her valuable either as asset or potential adversary. Better to have those skills working for Nexus than potentially against it." Quote. Their conversation paused as they entered Concordia's central complex, where security teams awaited debriefing regarding the infiltration incident. The next several hours involved comprehensive review of security protocols, identification of exploited vulnerabilities, and implementation of countermeasures based on the infiltrators' demonstrated methodology. Throughout the process, Ben maintained confidence in his handling of the situation despite questioning from certain security administrators who considered his unilateral approach unnecessarily risky. The infiltrator had demonstrated precisely the vulnerabilities they needed to identify, without causing harm or compromising critical systems. From his perspective, the incident represented valuable security assessment rather than genuine threat. Later that evening, as the immediate crisis response concluded and Concordia returned to normal operations, Ben found himself in his private study reviewing the security footage captured during the infiltration. The operative's methodology impressed him even in retrospect: elegant solutions to complex security challenges, minimum force application, precise resource management. You look pleased for someone whose security was just comprehensively penetrated, observed Nyota Zeph from the study in trance, her galaxy eyes reflecting ambient light in hypnotic patterns. The transcription information specialist had been conspicuously absent during the day's excitement, engaged in deep research within Nexus's newly established knowledge repository. Professional appreciation, Ben replied, gesturing for her to enter. It's not often you encounter someone who approaches problems with genuine elegance rather than brute force methodology. Nyota moved with characteristic fluid precision to join him at the display, her luminescent skin casting subtle patterns across the surrounding surfaces. The infiltrator demonstrated exceptional pattern recognition capabilities. Her movement through security matrices followed optimal pathways with 97% efficiency. Ben glanced at her with mild surprise. You've reviewed the security footage. Information patterns, she replied simply, galaxy eyes tracking the infiltrator's movement on the display with analytical intensity. Security alert propagation created distinct data signatures throughout Concordia's networks. Following those signatures revealed comprehensive incident documentation. The explanation reminded Ben of Nyota's unique capabilities, her specialized neural structure allowing her to perceive information flows invisible to conventional observation. In the 8 months since her arrival at Nexus, she had demonstrated increasingly sophisticated understanding of the dimension's underlying patterns, often detecting developments before monitoring equipment registered changes. What's your assessment of our visitor? He asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. Nyota's pattern recognition capabilities often revealed insights others missed entirely. She considered the question with characteristic thoroughness before responding. Professional param, eaters strictly defined by operational methodology rather than emotional or ideological influences. Movement patterns suggest extensive modification, genetic, cybernetic, or both, optimizing physical capabilities beyond species baseline. Communication style indicates isolated developmental background with minimal social integration experience. The assessment aligned with Ben's own observations adding nuance he hadn't fully articulated. You think she's been physically modified for her profession? With 93% probability, Nyota confirmed. Reaction speeds exceed unaugment. Biological limitations for identified species markers. Muscle coordination patterns suggest neural enhancement beyond standard training parameters. Fascinating adaptation efficiency. Ben nodded thoughtfully, considering this additional context against his own interaction with the infiltrator. The physical capabilities she demonstrated during their combat exchange had indeed exceeded typical parameters. Though he'd attributed this to exceptional training rather than biological modification. Your employment offer was genuine, Nyota observed, the statement carrying neither question nor judgment, simply confirmation of perceived pattern. You believe her capabilities would benefit Nexus security operations. I do, Ben acknowledged. Though I'm not certain she'll accept her operational history suggests strict independence, contract basis exclusively, no permanent allegiances or organizational affiliations. Yet something about your interaction created decision paradigm shift. Nyota noted with that peculiar perceptiveness that sometimes made Ben wonder exactly how much her galaxy eyes truly perceived. Her departure patterns indicated contemplative state rather than standard operational focus. You disrupted established methodology. The observation interested Ben more than he immediately revealed. During their brief interaction, he'd sensed something beneath the infiltrator's professional detachment. Not vulnerability exactly, but perhaps unrealized potential. Someone whose exceptional capabilities had been channeled into narrow operational parameters that utilized technical proficiency without engaging deeper purpose. Nexus has that effect on people, he said finally, thinking of how the dimension had influenced his own perspective over the past 8 months. What we're building here goes beyond conventional parameters: sanctuary, research station, diplomatic neutral ground. It's evolving into something unprecedented. Evolution requiring diverse contribution, Nyota agreed, her galaxy eyes shifting from the security footage to Ben's expression with analytical focus. Including specialized security expertise from unconventional sources. Their conversation might have continued further, but an alert from the communication system interrupted with notification of unusual activity in Loomis sector, specifically, in the energy-based environments created for photonic lifeforms. Recent adjustments to these highly specialized habitats had produced unexpected interaction patterns requiring immediate attention. Professional responsibilities temporary. Lee displaced consideration of the infiltration incident as Ben returned to the constant demands of managing Nexus's increasingly complex operations. Yet throughout the following days, his thoughts occasionally returned to the infiltration specialist and their unusual encounter. Something about her methodical approach and precise capabilities had resonated with his own evolution from impulsive hero to strategic architect. Both had developed beyond their original parameters. His transformation from wielder of the Omnitrix to creator of dimensions, her apparent journey from whatever origin had aped her to masterful specialist operating at the highest levels of her profession. The possibility that she might actually consider his employment offer remained uncertain but intriguing. Nexus Cont. Enud attracting unique individuals whose specialized capabilities contributed to its increasingly diverse development. Perhaps an infiltration specialist with exceptional pattern recognition and security analysis skills would become the next unexpected addition to their evolving community. Time would tell. For now, the Dimensional Sanctuary continued its development, each day bringing new challenges and opportunities as the unprecedented experiment in preservation and cooperation expanded beyond its original parameters. 17 days after her extraction from Nexus, Kala Vex stood in the private observation deck of her employer's flagship, delivering final mission assessment with characteristic precision. The vast vessel hung in deep space beyond standard patrol routes, its NCED stealth systems rendering it invisible to conventional detection methods, appropriate security given the sensitive nature of their discussion. Dimensional stability confirmed within theoretical parameters, she concluded, completing her comprehensive report on Nexus's capabilities. Sanctuary function operational with 34 distinct species successfully integrated. Security measures sophisticated but exploitable through identified methodologies. Overall assessment. Significant scientific and strategic value as research installation rather than military target. Her employer, a tall, elegant figure whose species remained deliberately obscured by specialized environmental suit, absorbed the information with unreadable attention. Only subtle shifts in breathing patterns indicated active processing rather than passive reception. And the architect himself, the employer inquired, voice modulated through translation systems to neutral tonality. Your assessment of Tennyson's capabilities. Combat proficiency exceeding standard parameters, Kala reported objectively. Strategic thinking adaptable to unexpected developments. Leadership methodology based on demonstrated competence rather than positional authority. Significant threat if directly opposed. The employer moved to the observation port, gazing outward at distant stars with contemplative posture. Your engagement, NT, was detected earlier than anticipated. Explanation. Dimensional monitoring capabilities exceeding intelligence estimates, Kala replied without defensive justification, simple factual assessment. Nexus itself appears to function as security system independent of technological measures. Sentient environmental response rather than programmed parameters. This information produced more evident reaction. Subtle shift in posture indicating heightened interest rather than disappointment at operational deviation. Fascinating. The dimensional consciousness theories appear substantially correct then. Considerably more valuable than anticipated. Kala maintained professional neutrality as her employer processed the implications of her report. The operation had technically succeeded despite significant deviation from original infiltration parameters. Information acquired would allow comprehensive assessment of Nexus's scientific and strategic value without compromising her negotiated agreement with Tennyson. Your mission performance was acceptable despite complications, the employer stated finally, returning attention to their direct interaction. Payment has been transferred according to contracted parameters. Additional compensation included for combat engagement not specified in original operational briefing. Acknowledged, Kala responded formally. Professional courtesy dictated minimizing discussion once mission parameters were fulfilled and compensation confirmed. Yet uncharacteristic consideration prompted additional communication. Operational disclosure. Employee. NT offer received from Sanctuary Administration. The employer's reaction was measured but evident, slight tension in previously relaxed posture. Interesting development. Tennyson attempted recruitment rather than capture. Your response. Consideration pending contract completion, Kala replied with careful precision. Professional independence maintained. Current operational parameters fulfilled without compromise. Of course, the employer acknowledged, studying her with that same unreadable attention that made direct communication somewhat uncomfortable. Your professional integrity remains unquestioned. The inquiry simply reflects interest in Tennyson's strategic approach, recruitment of potential opposition rather than elimination. Consistent with historical methodology, the Res. Pons contained subtle implication that her employment consideration represented legitimate operational interest rather than potential loyalty concern. Diplomatic phrasing that nonetheless established clear boundaries regarding future relationship parameters. Should you accept such employment, the employer continued after brief consideration, certain arrangements might prove mutually beneficial regarding information exchange. Nexus represents unprecedented research opportunity. Ongoing assessment would carry significant compensation potential. The proposal was carefully constructed, not requesting betrayal of potential future employer, simply suggesting continued professional relationship through legitimate information channels. Plausible deniability with clear subtext. Consideration noted, Kala acknowledged without specific commitment. Future operational parameters remain undefined pending current contract closure. Her employer accepted this professional boundary with appropriate respect, concluding their interaction with formal acknowledgement of completed obligations. The meeting ended with neither the false warmth of pretended connection nor the cold dismissal of pure transactional relationship, appropriate distance between specialists operating according to defined parameters. Returning to her personal vessel docked within the massive flagship, Kala initiated de-eparator procedures with characteristic efficiency. The small craft, heavily modified from original military specifications to suit her specialized requirements, represented the closest approximation of permanent residence she maintained. Its adaptive systems and comprehensive security measures provided necessary operational base while requiring minimal resource commitment. As automated systems dead the vessel away from the flagship toward open space, Kala permitted herself rare reflective consideration. The completed operation had satisfied professional requirements while creating unusual decision parameters regarding future contracts. Tennyson's employment offer remained active according to their negotiated terms, opportunity for specialized application of her capabilities within genuine unprecedented operational environment. Professional independence had defined her operational methodology for reasons beyond mere preference. Trust represented vulnerability in standard engagement parameters. Previous organizational affiliations had demonstrated the inherent risks of depending on others' operational integrity or ethical frameworks. Yet something about Nexus and its architect had disrupted her carefully maintained assessment parameters. Not emotional connection. Such vulnerabilities had been systematically removed from her psychological framework years ago, but intellectual engagement with genuinely novel circumstances. The dimension itself represented unprecedented achievement. Stable pocket universe operating according to designed parameters while demonstrating emergent properties beyond initial specifications. The scientific and philosophical implications alone warranted further investigation beyond standard operational assessment. More intriguing was the community. Why developing within this artificial reality, diverse species collaborating toward shared preservation objectives rather than merely coexisting in segregated territories. The social dynamics demonstrate surprising stability despite radically different biological and cultural parameters among participant species. And then there was Tennyson himself, combat specialist who had matched her augmented abilities without apparent enhancement technology beyond the Omnitrix. Strategic thinker who had recognized her infiltration methodology and adapted response protocols accordingly. Leader who commanded respect through demonstrated competence rather than hierarchical authority. Their brief engagement had revealed disconcerting compatibility in operational approach despite adversarial positions. Both valued efficiency over unnecessarily complicated methodology. Both demonstrated professional respect regardless of oppositional objectives. Both appreciated technical elegance beyond mere functional effectiveness. Such alignment in operational philosophy was rare enough to warrant consideration beyond standard contract evaluation parameters. Decision required. The vessel's navigation system awaited destination coordinates, Continuing established operational patterns would indicate standard mercenary contracts through existing channels. Alternative parameters would require active reconfigure. Ration of professional methodology developed through years of calculated optimization. Kala Vex entered coordinates with decisive precision, course plotting directly toward the secured dimensional AC. CES point where Nexus maintained controlled connection with conventional space. The decision represented significant deviation from established operational parameters, not merely new contract but fund. A mental reconfiguration of professional identity. Independence remained non-negotiable parameter regardless of organizational affiliation. Yet perhaps independence itself could evolve beyond mere ISO. Lashon toward something approaching collaborative specialization. Professional contribution toward objectives warranting specialized capabilities rather than mere contract fulfillment for financial compensation. As her vessel accelerated toward the coordinates that would return her to Nexus, Kala allowed herself the unusual indulgence of genuine anticipation, not the calculated assessment of operational potential, but something approaching actual interest in future possibilities. Evolution, after all, required adaptation to changing environmental parameters. Perhaps professional methodology C-old demonstrates similar flexibility without compromising fundamental operational integrity. The infiltration specialist prepared for her most challenging mission yet, legitimate entry through front door rather than covert penetration through security vulnerabilities. The irony was not entirely lost on her typically pragmatic assessment framework. Perhaps Nexus would prove as adaptable to her SPECI-ALESed requirements as she was willing to be to its organizational parameters. Time would demonstrate operational viability of this unprecedented arrangement. Chapter 3 End. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.